Chapter 192. After investigating the identity of the boss behind the scenes, Ryuto was first surprised, but then he suddenly felt that this was not something difficult to understand. After all, Rue Hui had made it very clear before that the current empress was not as simple as she looked on the surface. Not only did she come from a political family, but she was also likely to be the spokesperson of the American forces. In other words, the empress was a politician through and through. How was it not news that a politician used extreme means? It was simply a matter of course, using the seemingly benevolent White Tiger Gang to attack political opponents, using the psychedelic Saburo to sell drugs to make huge profits. There was no doubt that Empress Wu De's ambition was much greater than it looked on the surface, and her heart was much darker than it looked on the surface. However, when they found out that everything behind the scenes was actually caused by the empress of this country, Kai Yang and Tessa's expressions suddenly changed, and then they began to curse in a strange manner. Tessa sneered, gritted her teeth and said angrily, "This country is really hopeless. The dignified empress is actually doing such despicable things." Kai Yang also cursed. The empress of a country should be the mother of the world. Who knew that she was actually such a black-hearted thing? It's really laughable. Kai Yang and Tessa were both foreigners, or rather, they were a group of people who were ostracized by their own people in this country. This group of people was already very dissatisfied with this garbage country. And when they heard that the one who harmed them was actually the empress of a country, their attitude was even more furious. The Japanese themselves were very xenophobic, or rather, they were very xenophobic towards the yellow-skinned Asians. If the white-skinned masters came, they would kneel down and lick them from head to toe. But if the Asians of other countries came, then they would show their true colors. The Big Dipper Alliance was famous for its firearms, and most of its members were like Kai Yang, originally from a mysterious eastern neighbor. According to Kai Yang, he and his brothers killed a few bullies in their hometown, and had no choice but to flee abroad. However, after coming here, they were ostracized and had no way to find a proper job. In the end, when they were about to sleep on the streets, Kai Yang and a few of his brothers decided to band together and walk down this road. In the end, it was just a helpless move to make a living. However, because of Kai Yang and his brothers' hard work, they inadvertently made their business bigger and bigger, and even became one of Tokyo's 5 great extremes. This was something that Kai Yang had never thought of. Tessa's situation was similar. More than a decade ago, she was just a pitiful person who was kidnapped and sold to Tokyo to do some special jobs. She lived in endless pain and torture every day like a dog. Later on, Tessa could no longer stand the oppression of the locals on her and her sisters, so she tried her best to climb up step by step. However, she didn't expect that the path would become darker and darker, and she directly became a leader of the Great Path. Her experience was also very legendary. These 2 Great Path leaders were essentially different from the brothers Shirakawa and Saburo. They didn't do this for the sake of profit. They were forced by the situation and had no choice. Therefore, after 3 rounds of drinking, Kai Yang and Tessa looked at each other, and then said to Ryuto, "Although the White Tiger Gang and psychedelic Saburo have been eliminated, the current situation is still very unfavorable for us. The Queen will definitely continue to cause trouble for us, right? What's going on?" Hearing this, Ryuto couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. After all, this time they had destroyed Owada Masa's Great Path unification plan, and completely eliminated 2 of her most useful underground forces. It would be strange if the Queen didn't fly into a rage and wait for an opportunity to take revenge. In this case, the Rulon Group, Big Dipper Alliance, and Black Snake Alliance would still have to face threats from all sides in the future, and there was a high chance that they would be the kind that would attack both openly and covertly. At this time, Tessa continued to add, "If that's the case, why don't we really form an alliance and turn the 3 into 1? This way, everyone can take care of each other and cooperate with each other. What do you think?" Although the Rulon Group, Big Dipper Alliance, and Black Snake Alliance were now members of the Runxia Alliance in name, but with the death of Shirakawa and Saburo, The 5 Great Path Alliances existed in name only. Moreover, Ryudo and the others didn't want to use the alliance that Shirakawa and Saburo had planned to establish, so they had already burned the Renshia Alliance document. In the future, they would never mention the Renshia Alliance, in order to avoid thinking of the disgusting Renshia Alliance. However, the disbandment of the Renshia Alliance didn't mean that the 3 of them couldn't form a new alliance and start afresh. After all, in essence, the business scope of the 3 Great Path Alliances didn't have any conflicts, and they could even achieve excellent complementary effects. The Rulong group focused on martial arts. The group of people led by Ryudo were very good at fighting, and they were second to none in the Great Path Alliance. The Big Dipper Alliance focused on connections. The group of people led by Kai Yang had various armed connections all over the world, and they could buy many things that ordinary people couldn't imagine. The Black Snake Alliance focused on financial resources and intelligence. The group of people led by Tessa ran many nightclubs and unspeakable businesses. At the same time, they were also the place where all kinds of intelligence gathered. From this point of view, the business of the 3 Great Path Alliances didn't conflict, and they could even cover each other and protect each other. If they joined forces, they really had a chance to become an extreme path overlord, or even an extreme path empire. At that time, they would be the new Yanko Star, the Italian mafia in Japan, and the underground kings who would no longer be the running dogs of politicians. Ryudo had actually thought about this a long time ago, so after Tessa and Kai Yang expressed their intention to join forces, he also reached out to the 2 allies without hesitation. On the same day, the new formation document was completed. Following the 3 founders' ancient method of cutting off the head of a chicken, this new alliance called Black Hand Alliance was established, and it represented the Tokyo Extreme Path Alliance. Black Hand meant unscrupulous, and it also meant that the people in this alliance were all real villains. After all, the righteous people in this country were all despicable people like Empress Kawada and Hiro Karakawa. Ryudo and the others deliberately named the alliance Black Hand, in order to show their disdain for those so-called righteous people. If you're righteous, then we'll be the villains. Let's see if your righteous people are stronger, or if our Black Hand is stronger. Bring it on. Although the work of establishing the Black Hand Alliance was quite complicated, and it involved the cooperation of the 3 organizations, Ryudo didn't need to worry about it. The Extreme Path side was handled by advisor Fujiki, the company side was handled by Gao Yuan, and the legal side was handled by Sensible. Basically, Ryudo once again became idle in the afternoon, and secretly avoided everyone to go to a place that he hadn't been to in a long time. And that place was called Kamishiro Daya. When Ryudo stood at the door of the Kamishiro Daya, that he had been to a few months ago, he actually felt like it was a lifetime ago. A few months ago, Ryudo had just crossed over, and was brought here by the Kamiyoshi people. Furthermore, he was almost poked to death by that old fellow Rabbit Ball. It was also in this place that Long Do made a vow to Luli for 2 years. In the end, he polished the statue for quite a long time with his face covered in dust. Only then did he leave like a plumber, who had spent a whole night sweating profusely. However, the reason Ryudo came back today wasn't to secretly chat with Colored Glaze, but because he was invited by Rue Hui. Creak. When Ryudo came to the door, the side door quietly opened, and Rabbit Ball's figure slowly walked towards him. He came in front of Ryudo and slightly bowed, and lightly said, "Young Master Ryudo, please, Lady Rue Hui has been waiting for you for a long time." Now that he saw Ryudo Kiryu, Rabbit Ball's emotions were somewhat complicated. After all, he felt that things were getting more and more wrong. At first, Ryudo liked Colored Glaze, and even publicly said that he wanted to marry her. This was actually a very serious problem, and it also meant that Ryudo and the Kamiyoshi people should be serious enemies. But after he interacted with Lady Rue Hui seemed to like this young man, and obviously wanted to support him, which made Rabbit Ball very puzzled. What kind of magic does this young man have? Why does Lady Rue Hui value him so much? Rabbit Ball was a Kamiyoshi old man who watched Rue Hui grow up. But even so, He had never seen Lady Rue Hui have such a kind attitude towards anyone. Although this time Rue Hui called Ryudo over not because of personal matters, but to be able to call him home, this was a very rare scene. In this way, Ryudo followed Rabbitball around the Kamiyoshi villa, and after circling around, they came to a hidden basement. Walking down the stairs, Ryudo saw Rue Hui's graceful figure, and not far from her, there was something similar to a test bench, and on top of it was the body of Pang Saburo that had been dried up. In the dark basement, there was a beauty who bloomed like a flower, as well as a sinister corpse. This scene could be said to be a stark contrast, adding a dangerous aura to the beauty of the Kamikaze family's leader. Of course, in the basement, in addition to Rue Hui, there were several other staff wearing white coats. Looking carefully, there were many kinds of research equipment placed in the corner of the basement. From the clothes of these staff, and the various research investigations being conducted, this should be a temporary small research institute. When Ryudo walked down the stairs, Rue Hui turned to him and smiled. "Ryudo, you are here." At this moment, it seemed that in Ryudo's eyes, she didn't look like the master of Kamiyoshi, nor was she a powerful woman in Tokyo, but a kind and lovely big sister. At least Ryudo thought so. Chapter 193. Yo, Ms. Rue Hui, this guy seems to have changed a lot. Ryudo came in front of Rue Hui and greeted her, then turned his head to look at Pang Saburo, who was lying on the experiment table. If Ryudo didn't recognize his appearance, it was really hard to imagine that this guy who looked very dry now was actually the same person as the strong monster who fought with him before. Last night, after killing Pang San Lang, Long Do asked Rue Hui for help because he didn't have any medical talents. He asked Rue Hui to send someone to study this guy's body. There was no doubt that Pang Saburo's strange state yesterday was absolutely abnormal. The reason that led to the state that could almost be called a Frankenstein was actually just because he took a piece of black paper. That's all. Although Ryudo knew that the organization Psychedelic Saburo was an organization that sold various forbidden drugs as its main source of profit, he didn't expect that they actually had such an outrageous thing in their hands. If this strange drug was widely spread, not to mention the entire Tokyo's extreme due, perhaps the whole world would fall into chaos. This was a big trouble. In order to find out what was going on, Ryudo contacted Rue Hui and asked her to deal with the fat Saburo and the skinny Saburo. He believed that this kamikaze leader would be able to easily find out what was going on. It's indeed a big change. According to the investigation of our research department, this fat man's body is like a deflated balloon after death. Almost all the cells inside are rapidly withering. This should be the side effect of that forbidden drug, Rue Hui said while looking at the guy who was no longer human on the experiment table, at the same time showing a look of disgust. Forbidden drug. I can't imagine what kind of drug can achieve this effect. And it's actually just a piece of black paper? Hihi, Ryudo-kun, about that paper. As a member of Extreme Do, you should know more about it than me. Who knew that when Ryudo talked about the black paper, Rue Hui pursed her lips and smiled. What do you mean? That's paper anesthetic. Haven't you heard of it? It's a very popular thing on the streets. Rue Hui picked up a piece of paper from the table beside her and soaked it in the reagent. After a few seconds, the liquid in the reagent was absorbed by the paper, and the color of the paper turned into the color of the reagent. Seeing this scene, Ryudo suddenly understood and said, "Ah, I see. Is this the paper anesthetic? I seem to have seen something similar." In the wee hours of the morning, Ryudo brought his men to raid the headquarters of Psychedelic Saburo. In addition to seeing a large number of various forbidden drugs, he also saw many small bundles of paper. These sheets of paper were stacked together like some kind of calendar or something else. They looked particularly out of place when mixed with various drugs. However, Ryudo was not interested in these things. He ordered his subordinates to leave some pills to sync with the group of drug addicts and burn the rest. At this time, after listening to Rue Hui's explanation, he reacted. Those sheets of paper were not ordinary sheets of paper, but a kind of alternative drug. Various drugs were refined into juice, and then the paper was soaked in it. This way, the paper would be impregnated with the drug's composition. When needed to take it, just lick it or eat it whole. This kind of paper anesthetic was very easy to carry. Even in public places, it would not be easy to attract attention. It could be said that it was the favorite new product of the psychedelic Saburo group of trash. However, the anesthetic that Pang Saburo ate in the end was on a completely different level from the things they usually sold. That was the genuine Superman medicine, because she disliked the air in the research institute. Not long after, Ruehue brought Ryuto to the surface and returned to her room. This was the Kamishiro courtyard, where colored glaze usually lived. Most of the time, Ruehue lived in the Kamishiro garden headquarters of Kamiyoshi. But even so, Ruehue still had her own room in the Kamishiro courtyard. But it looked like there was no life in the room. Obviously, no one usually lived here. After returning to the room, Ruehue sat in front of the tea table in a dignified manner. She stretched out her slender white hand to pick up the teacup, washed the teapot with warm water, took it out, put it on the tea tray, and then put the tea leaves into the pot. Ruehue was obviously very knowledgeable in the tea ceremony. Her every move looked quite elegant and smooth. Her hand swept across the tea table, teapot, and other places in a continuous manner, as if she was carrying out a graceful and agile performance. It was a leisurely afternoon. Looking at such a beauty sitting in front of him making tea, for Ryuto, it could be said to be quite a wonderful experience, especially when he just saw the corpse of a monster that he killed with his own hands. While making tea, Ruehue said, "Our professionals have just interrogated the skinny man. He said that the name of the anesthetic is Hell Butterfly, and it was sold to him by a seller who he didn't know the identity of." In addition to Panzaburo was also alive in the hands of Ruehue, and it seemed that he was tortured by the professional ninjas of Kamiyoshi. Speaking of torture, ninjas are professionals. Unless they are made of iron, otherwise in a few moves, they are afraid that even their underwear will be revealed. Hell Butterfly is indeed a very vivid name. After eating it, you will be ready to go to hell. Indeed, although the effect of this Superman potion is strong, the accompanying risk is equally terrifying. Basically, after taking it, the mortality rate will reach 100%. It is completely burning oneself. Although the research team of Kamiyoshi hasn't completely analyzed the composition of this Superman potion, from the partial composition that has been analyzed now, the design of this Hell Butterfly didn't intend to let the people who eat it live. Suddenly, Ryuto couldn't help but ask, such a powerful forbidden drug is indeed impossible to be developed by psychedelic Saburo. Even the Owada behind him can't do it, right? It can't be done. As far as I know, such a fierce forbidden drug can only be made by a large international drug research center. This kind of research center is basically in the hands of a few developed countries. Heavenly Eye Group may be an exception. When she said those words, a sharp look flashed in Ruehue's eyes. In this world, there are not many companies that can have an international drug research center. In the entire island, only Heavenly Eye Group has this ability. After all, the four major departments under Heavenly Eye Group include Weapon Department, Secret Department, Guard Department, and Pharmaceutical Department. Weapon Department is responsible for researching all kinds of cutting-edge killing weapons. Heavenly Eye Group is an international-level superarms dealer. This department can be said to have great merit. Guard Department and Secret Department are responsible for protecting the safety of the group, collecting intelligence of hostile forces, or simply assassinating. These two departments are also easy to understand. As for the last Pharmaceutical Department, it is a low-key department that rarely appears on the table, and it is even rare to hear about them. Up to now, Ruehue only knew that Pharmaceutical Department has several large drug research centers, but she didn't hear that they have researched anything decent. However, judging from the incident with the Hell Butterfly, it wasn't that the Pharmaceutical Department of the Heavenly Eye Group didn't come up with anything, but that the things they came up with were rarely circulated outside. This time, the reason why the Saburo brothers had a Hell Butterfly was most likely because Saburo had accidentally contacted the pharmaceutical department through some channels and obtained a trial product from them. It was not a product that was ready to be sold. After all, from Ruehue's point of view, even if such a domineering forbidden drug could be mass-produced, the costs would be extremely high. Selling it for money would be a sure loss. Therefore, Iam's goal shouldn't be to use this drug to make money, but to give it to her direct subordinates to use as a combat amplification tool in some battles. Just imagine, Yongji's direct subordinates, spreading martial arts under the heavens. Each of them would have a hell butterfly, and all of them would turn into invulnerable monsters that would rampage on the battlefield. Just how terrifying would that scene be? It would be like a monster invasion. So that's how it is. I feel that Iam is behind this. Hearing this, Ryudo couldn't help but sigh. Although he didn't hear much about the Heavenly Eye group recently, it is obvious that this huge group has already started to prepare for the war more than a year later. Thinking of this, Ryudo felt a little helpless. After all, the more he knew how terrifying the Heavenly Eye group is, the more he felt weak and powerless in front of that woman. At this time, Ruehue had already poured the boiled water into the pot. The tea leaves in the pot floated around, and the tea was clear. After being steeped many times, the fragrance was even more distinct. He smelled the faint tea fragrance in his nose, and a faint mist rose from the table. This caused Long Do's tiredness to surge. After all, he hadn't slept since last night, and he was already exhausted. Ruehue poured out the freshly brewed tea, and turned to Ryudo. "Oh right, there's also Xiaohe tea on ya." Oh. When Ruehue turned around, she found that Ryudo was lying on the tatami in a daze, and he was even snoring slightly. The two were only halfway through their conversation, but one of them suddenly fell asleep. This should have been very rude. However, Ruehue didn't get angry when she saw this. Instead, she went over and put Ryudo's head on her lap, so that he could rest more comfortably. In the room, the tea fragrance lingered. There was a young man lying on her lap. Ruehue reached out and stroked the blonde hair lying on her lap. She suddenly remembered that when Colored Glaze was still very young, she also liked to lie close to her mother like this. When did Ruehue start to be extra strict with Colored Glaze, and started to resist her approach? It should be from the moment she realized that her death was near. In order to not let her daughter be too sad after her death, Ruehue decided to keep a certain distance from Colored Glaze. After that, no one enjoyed this kind of treatment until Ryudo appeared. Unfortunately, this guy's blonde hair was a bit prickly, and it wasn't as soft as Colored Glaze. After stroking Ryudo's head for a while, Ruehue shook her head regretfully, but she still revealed a motherly smile later that afternoon. The end of the Dori First High School also came as scheduled. For Colored Glaze, who didn't join any activities department, if she didn't have anything to do, she would go home early and do some daily study or entertainment activities at home. After getting out of the car, Colored Glaze stretched lazily, as if she felt a bit tired. It wasn't that she was tired because of a mere class. Colored Glaze's tiredness was clearly caused by the boredom of the past 2 days. That guy Ryudo, he didn't even respond to my messages this afternoon. But things over there should be settled. Colored Glaze couldn't help but complain to Dancing Costume behind her, as she walked towards her home. Dancing Costume heard and replied, "Should be." According to our information, Rulon Group has completely taken over Psychedelic Saburo and White Tiger Gang's territory. They should be quite busy right now. If they're busy, then it's fine. Isn't that Rabin? Why is he standing in the hallway? After entering the Kamishiro courtyard, Colored Glaze took off her shoes and walked in the spacious wooden hallway with soft indoor shoes. But unexpectedly, she saw a figure that shouldn't be here. Generally speaking, unless there is an emergency, the Rabitoshi in the cat house is the ninja responsible for guarding Ruehue. Now that Rabin was standing in the hallway, it meant that Ruehue should be nearby. That's Mother's room? Did she come here? Although Colored Glaze and Ruehue were mother and daughter, Ruehue was usually busy and rarely came to the Kamishiro courtyard to accompany her daughter. Not to mention, she had been deliberately distancing herself from Colored Glaze in recent years. So with a strong curiosity, Colored Glaze walked towards her mother's room. But after seeing Colored Glaze, Robin's face changed slightly, and said with a slightly awkward tone, "Lady Colored Glaze, you're back." In Luli's impression, Rabbit Ball had always been an elegant gentleman who always wore an indifferent expression. He rarely showed such a strange attitude. How should she describe it? Right now, Rabbit Ball felt like he was a thief. Or rather, he felt like he was helping a thief keep a lookout before being discovered. "Housekeeper Rabin, what's wrong with you? Why do you have such a strange expression? Is Mother not inside?" As Luli spoke, she stuck her head out and looked towards the room. The thick wooden door was tightly locked, and an elegant aroma of tea wafted out from the inside, mixed with the familiar scent of his mother. Although it was somewhat strange for Rue Hui to come here, it wasn't incomprehensible. After all, this was her house, so naturally, she could come and go as she pleased. But Rabin swallowed his saliva, and a few drops of cold sweat fell from his forehead. "What should I do? Lady Rue Hui and Ryudo, that little bastard, have been inside for 2 hours. What are they doing inside? If Lady knows, wouldn't it be troublesome?" According to Rabin's knowledge, after Lady Rue Hui and Ryudo entered her room 2 hours ago, the door and windows were always closed, and there was no movement. For a man and a woman to stay in the same room for such a long time, Bunny Ball couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. Even though Long Do was still an immoral person in his eyes, he still couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. That's right, at least in Rabin's opinion, Ryudo was still in a sealed state due to the needle, and Lady Rue Hui also knew about it. But at the same time, Rabin also knew that if Lady Rue Hui really wanted to do that, she could have another close ninja help to unseal Ryudo's sealed state. After all, the needle that Rabin injected before didn't completely remove Ryudo's thing. It just targeted the acupuncture point so that it couldn't raise the flag. With the understanding of the principle, another acupuncture point could be cured at any time. And then it could continue to play a variety of very interesting roles. In other words, Rabin actually didn't know if the two people in the room did something wrong inside. For Lady Rue Hui's personal affairs and her personal preferences, Rabin didn't intend to delve into it, and there was no need to delve into it. After all, that was his master, and his master could do whatever she wanted. What's more, Lady Rue Hui had lost her husband for many years. It was normal for her to find a male companion to relieve her loneliness. It was not worth making a fuss about. But the problem was that this time, the person in the room with Lady Rue Hui was Ryudo, and Lady Colored Glaze obviously had some unclear emotional disputes with Ryudo. Wasn't this a mess? If Lady Colored Glaze really liked Ryudo, and Lady Rue Hui used that kid in front of her, then wouldn't it be a mother and daughter fighting for the same man? What kind of scandal was this? Thinking of this, Rabin's face couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, and his frightened and sweaty situation increased Colored Glaze's doubts. Something's not right. Bunny Ball is rarely this shocked. Something must have happened inside. At this moment, Colored Glaze's mind suddenly appeared the plot of the novel that Yun Yen had written not long ago. In the novel written by Yun Yen, titled Zhu Yanxue, Chapter of Maternal Love, it described the image of an awkward and pitiful mother. The mother grew up in a large family, and was forced to work hard for the family, until she was almost 40 years old, when she regained her freedom. After that, she commissioned a scientific research center to make a test tube daughter. She doted on her daughter since she was young. The mother and daughter loved each other, and their family was sweet. But when she realized that she was dying, in order to prevent her daughter from being sad, the mother consciously distanced herself from her cute daughter. And in the latter half of the novel, there was a time when the mother accidentally fell to the ground in her room, due to a serious illness. Because she didn't want her daughter to find out, she ordered her bodyguards to block the door, and not let her daughter in Colored Glaze originally sneered in disdain, after reading Yun Yen's novel, that the story is purely fictional, and if there are similarities, it is purely coincidental. What kind of lousy novel was this? There was no logic at all. How could there be such a thing in the world? It was too ridiculous. Other than Kamiyoshi's Zhaiwang, what kind of work would keep people busy until they were almost 40 years old to regain their freedom? and have the right to live their own lives. Ridiculous, ridiculous, completely impossible. But just as Rabin was covered in cold sweat and blocking the door of her mother's room, scenes from the novel quickly flashed past Colored Glaze's eyes. No, it can't be right. Could it be that something really happened to Mother? That's why she, thinking of this, Colored Glaze suddenly felt a little panicked. So she quickly said to Rabin, "Move, I want to go in." This, Madame Ruehui is still inside, young mistress you. You also know that I'm the young mistress? That's my mother inside. Is there anything that I can't know? Move. Because of the tense situation, Colored Glaze was too lazy to care so much. She reached out to push Rabin away and opened the door without hesitation. The moment she opened the door, Colored Glaze saw a figure lying in the room. From the black-sleeved kimono embroidered with double-leaf sunflower pattern, with golden thread, the person lying there was definitely Ruehui. But with Ruehui's usual dignified manner, how could she casually lie on the tatami like an ordinary person? Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Something must have happened to her mother. Maybe she vomited a lot of blood. She was struggling on the line between life and death. Suddenly, Colored Glaze rushed in and shouted as she rushed in, "Mother! You're not, ah?" After Colored Glaze entered the room, the first thing she saw was Ruehui collapsed on the tatami. The second thing she saw was Ryudo, who was sleeping soundly in Ruehui's arms. The last word, "ah," contained all the doubts and confusion in Colored Glaze's heart. For a moment, she thought that she was seeing things and hurriedly rubbed her eyes. After rubbing her eyes once, the situation was still the same. After rubbing her eyes twice, the situation still didn't change. After rubbing her eyes 3 times, what the hell was she rubbing her eyes for? That's right. In the master room of the Kamishiro courtyard, Ruehui was sleeping soundly with Ryudo on the tatami. Ruehui even hugged Ryudo in her arms and rubbed his hair with a doting expression. For a moment, Colored Glaze didn't know what to say. Colored Glaze Kanzaki returned home and saw Mother being intimate with her future boyfriend. What kind of expression should Colored Glaze have at this moment? Just as this young lady's face revealed an incomparably complex expression, Ryudo also woke up amidst a soft and fragrant feeling. The moment he woke up, Ryudo felt something soft on his face, and something slippery and cold on his head. What is this? It's so fragrant and soft. Out of instinct, Ryudo took a deep breath and slowly raised his head. After raising his head, the first thing he saw was Ruehui lying in front of him. Perhaps it was because she was also very tired, or perhaps it was because she saw that Ryudo was sleeping so soundly. Ruehui also laid down with a peaceful expression on her face. After seeing Ruehui lying next to him, Ryudo's second sight was the young lady standing not far away. Her hair was almost standing on end, and she had an expression as if she was looking at trash. "Ryudo Kiryu, you're awake. Is it comfortable hugging Mother while sleeping?" When he saw Colored Glaze's murderous expression and Ruehui lying next to him, Ryudo suddenly realized that he seemed to have fallen into the most powerful hell in history. Chapter 194. Cough, cough. Let's deal with the situation first. Because he was too tired this afternoon, he suddenly fell asleep while chatting with Lady Ruehui. When he woke up, he noticed that Lady Ruehui was also asleep beside him, and she even hugged him. Coincidentally, Madame Ruehui's daughter, Miss Liuli, happened to see this scene. Question: in this situation, how should I, Ryudo Kiryu, escape? A. Kill myself on the spot. B. Kill myself on the spot. C. Kill myself on the spot. Sorry, it wasn't because Ryudo had serious suicidal tendencies. It was because he couldn't think of how to explain the current situation, especially when Luli looked at him, as if he was looking at unrecyclable trash. Long Do couldn't help but tremble, and Ryudo's trembling made Colored Glaze's misunderstanding even more, making her believe that Ryudo and Ruehui had some kind of secret relationship. Humph. After leaving a cold humph, Colored Glaze turned around and ran out without hesitation. She ran away just like that? Ryudo originally thought that Colored Glaze would directly slap him and activate Shiraba mode. who knew that she just left a cold humph and ran away like a little girl who was bullied. Seeing this scene, Ryudo immediately stood up and wanted to chase after her, but a cold hand grabbed his wrist. Wait, let her calm down. Under Ryudo's shocked gaze, Ruehue slowly sat up from the ground and calmly tidied up her slightly messy hair. What's going on? Lady Ruehue, Lady Ruehue, when did you wake up? About half an hour ago. So you're saying that when colored glaze came in, you were actually pretending to be asleep? What kind of situation was this? What was Lady Ruehue thinking? Ryudo didn't know whether to laugh or cry, because he couldn't understand Kandai Ruehue's thoughts at all. Generally speaking, if Ruehue woke up early, she would have left before colored glaze came in. How could she lie down with Ryudo and let her daughter see such a scene that could easily lead to misunderstandings? It's all right. Ruehue smiled faintly and said, people always need to grow. That exciting scene just now was a good opportunity for colored glaze to grow. I think it's too exciting. I feel like the colored glaze is going to chop my head off at any moment. If the colored glaze could cut you with a hatchet, it means that she has indeed grown. Unfortunately, she won't. At this point, Ruehue sighed slightly. Ruehue had noticed a problem a long time ago, and that was that his daughter Kanzaki colored glaze was incredibly lacking in personal initiative. Personal initiative had two meanings. The first was that people could actively understand the objective world, and the second was that they could actively change the objective world under the guidance of their knowledge. The colored glaze didn't lack the ability to understand the objective world, but she lacked the motivation to actively change the objective world. This was reflected in real life. The colored glaze was rather passive in everything. She rarely took the initiative to make her own choices. Every day, she lived lazily without a goal. Ryudo had noticed this problem as well. After all, in normal life, the colored glaze would almost never take the initiative to call or text him. She would only respond when he looked for her. In this regard, the colored glaze was far inferior to Dunya and Yunyan. After all, the two of them would always chat with Ryudo about their novels, or go out to spar. However, the colored glaze would never do such a thing. It was as if she was always passively waiting for others to approach her, while she remained in a lazy state of doing nothing. If there was a difficult mission that required the colored glaze's help, with the colored glaze's intelligence, she would be able to give the perfect answer. However, this was under the premise that others gave her a clear goal. If no one gave her a mission, this young miss would be like a blind fly, flying around aimlessly in the same place. This situation was actually very bad. Although Ryudo faintly sensed it, there was nothing he could do about it. Just as Ruehue said, if it had been Yunyan and Dunya who saw the situation just now, they would probably have drawn their swords in anger. At the very least, they would have slapped Ryudo. However, the colored glaze only knew how to turn around and run. She didn't even dare to come up and slap him. She was very weak. Ruehue obviously didn't like her weak and passive personality, so she decided to give her daughter a harsh punishment. That was to let her daughter make a scene outside and do whatever she wanted. Ruehue explained her intentions to Ryudo, and Rabbit Ball also came in and reported, Madame Ruehue, colored glaze ran away without looking back. She ran away while shouting that she wanted to run away from home. Run away from home? Not bad, not bad. If she runs away from home, it means that she can still be saved. If she doesn't even dare to run away from home, then she's done for. After hearing that her daughter ran away from home, Ruehue revealed a satisfied smile. Good fellow, you're the ghost's mother. You're so happy that your daughter ran away from home. Although he knew that Ruehue was very strict with colored glaze, Ryudo didn't expect her to go to this extent. So he couldn't help but complain. Really, Madame Ruehue, if you want to do this, you should at least tell me in advance. You made me. Speaking until here, Ryudo couldn't help but blush. It was obvious that he couldn't handle the hugging a man in his arms just now. Until now, Ryudo felt that his nose was filled with the sweet fragrance of Ruehue's body. It was as if he could still feel her soft body touch his face. This situation was a bit too exciting for Ryudo, who was still a pure and innocent virgin. It was to the point where he was about to have a nosebleed. Aya! But Rui Hui heard him and walked over with a smile. She smiled and said in his ear, "What's wrong with you? Don't tell me you have some weird thoughts about an old woman like me. You can't be, right?" After hearing Rui Hui's words, Ryudo's face turned even redder. But he still said seriously, "How could that be, Madame Rui Hui? You're not an old woman, you're very, very charming." Indeed, Ryudo's words could be said to be from the bottom of his heart. Without a doubt, Rui Hui was a very charming lady. This didn't only refer to her appearance, but also her personality and temperament were very special. She was as fragrant and charming as freshly brewed tea. So Ryudo definitely didn't think of her as an old woman, but as a very charming older sister. After hearing the young man's serious comments, Rui Hui opened her mouth slightly, then turned her head away. "It's not a good habit to be glib-tongued. I still have something to do. You go back first, but don't pay attention to colored glaze for now. Just have Rabitoshi follow her." Were my words too direct and made Madame Rui Hui angry? Rui Hui's words more or less sounded like she was asking him to leave, so Ryudo could only sigh and leave the Kamishiro courtyard dejectedly. Today was a failure. He angered colored glaze and angered Madame Rui Hui. What a miserable day. On the way back, Ryudo looked listless, but in reality, that wasn't the case. What Ryudo didn't see was that when he left, Rui Hui turned her face away and blushed slightly. The master of Kamiyoshi casually picked up the mirror beside her and looked at the red lips, white teeth, and beautiful face in the mirror. This face didn't change much in the past few decades, and her appearance had been maintained at a very stable level. And because of that special genetic disease, until her death, Rui Hui's appearance shouldn't change much, as if she was frozen at around 30 years old. Am I still very charming? Unfortunately, for an old woman who is about to die, charm and whatnot are completely meaningless. Thinking of this, Rui Hui couldn't help but shake her head with a bitter smile, and her mood became a little depressed. Of course, even if her mood was depressed, she couldn't be as depressed as Colored Glaze, who was running alone on the street. If Colored Glaze was now shooting a TV series, then the TV series should be called Run, Miss. After seeing the sensational scene before, Colored Glaze only felt that her head was buzzing. She didn't know what to do, nor did she know where to go. In short, Colored Glaze knew that she must first run out of the Kamishiro courtyard, and run along the road and run, and run and run. Huff, huff, huff. However, even though it was said that she kept running forward, in fact, Luli was already panting after running for a distance of over 100 meters. Hence, she changed to a tortoise-like pace. After all, Colored Glaze's physical fitness was at the level of LV1 dust of the world, so running was too difficult for her. Seeing Colored Glaze running alone on the street, Dancing Costume, who was not far behind, didn't know whether to laugh or cry and asked, "Madame Rui Hui is really too much. Is it really okay for the lady to run on the street like this?" "No problem. It should be okay." Beside her, Bunny Ball took out a handkerchief to wipe the sweat on his face, and replied with a somewhat complicated tone, "Secretly protect Colored Glaze from afar, but don't interfere with her actions." This was the order that Rui Hui gave to Bunny Ball and Dancing Costume. So unless there was something that Colored Glaze couldn't solve, or something that involved personal safety, her followers couldn't do anything. From a certain point of view, Rui Hui understood her daughter very well, because this method of keeping a distance allowed Colored Glaze to completely vent her resentment and to think deeply on her own. But at this time, the lady walked on the street hatefully and couldn't help but curse. Damn! Annoying! Shameless thing! Colored Glaze's mind was in a mess, very, very mess, to the point that she didn't even have the energy to think. She just walked blindly on the street, not knowing where to go. Walking and walking, she left the Kamishiro courtyard of the rich people's villa district. Judging from her appearance, Luli was a delicate, elegant, and beautiful young lady. Naturally, such a young lady would be very conspicuous walking on the street by herself. Thus, not long after she left alone, a few sloppily dressed delinquents set their eyes on this young lady in distress, and they sneakily surrounded her. Chapter 195. This cute lady. Where are you going by yourself? Do you need us brothers to accompany you? Just as Colored Glaze was walking with her head down, she suddenly heard a slippery and perverted voice in front of her. She looked up and saw 3 delinquents dressed in gaudy clothes. No matter how she looked at them, they didn't look like good people. They were smiling frivolously at her, as if they were saying, "Girl, come play with me." TSK. Facing these delinquents, Colored Glaze naturally couldn't be bothered with them. She just wanted to leave. But as soon as she took a step, one of them blocked her way. The smile on his face was even more disgusting. "Move." Colored Glaze took a deep breath and said in a commanding tone. Not to mention that she was in a bad mood. Even in normal times, Colored Glaze had this kind of attitude. However, her commanding tone clearly angered the 3 hooligans. One of the delinquents who had dyed his hair red, as if he had changed into headshot battle-damaged skin, frowned and said, "Yo, this little girl is quite arrogant. She doesn't put us brothers in her eyes at all." "That's right. Maybe she's a young lady from a famous family." What a joke! Would a young lady from a famous family walk outside like this? She would probably have a few bodyguards by her side. That's true, ha 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 ha. Walking outside alone? Wouldn't she have a few bodyguards by her side? After hearing the words of these delinquents, Colored Glaze suddenly reacted and quickly turned her head to look. There was no one behind her. The dancing costume that she was used to following wasn't there. The rest of Kamiyoshi's bodyguards weren't there either. No, it can't be, right? I already ran out like this, and none of them actually followed me? When she realized that she didn't bring anyone behind her and was alone, Colored Glaze couldn't help but sigh. Anyway, they should be silently protecting me in the dark. There shouldn't be no one following me. That's too ridiculous. Just as Colored Glaze was sighing, the 3 hooligans beside her couldn't hold it in any longer. After all, her expression of not treating others as human beings was very sarcastic. It was as if she was standing next to 3 large pieces of trash. "Heh, we brothers have roamed the Jianghu for decades. And this is the first time we've met someone who doesn't put us in their eyes." What? At such a young age, she had already learned to look at people through the cracks of the door, right? She was treating him like a 2-dimensional piece of paper. One of the thugs couldn't help but snort. "Humph. We're from the Rulong group. If you don't give us face, we'll burn your house down." But it would have been better if he hadn't said anything. As soon as he said the words Rulong group, Colored Glaze's eyes immediately turned cold. She slowly lowered her head, her facial muscles trembling slightly, as if she was gritting her teeth. At the same time, she asked coldly, "What did you say? Rulong group, right? Are you scared? Our Rulong group is Tokyo's #1. Get lost." Without waiting for the hooligan to finish speaking, Colored Glaze couldn't help but raise her hand and slap him in the face. Colored Glaze wanted to slap Ryuto not long ago, but she didn't dare. Now this self-proclaimed member of the Rulong group actually took the initiative to come over. Wouldn't she slap him like Ryuto? Damn it, I don't dare to hit Ryuto, but I don't dare to hit you? Who do you think you are? Pa! A burst of crisp applause sounded. The hooligan was stunned, and the other 2 were also stunned. Colored Glaze held her painful palm and jumped up on the spot. "It hurts. It hurts. Hitting people is actually such a painful thing." Colored Glaze held her palm and secretly cried out in pain. The other person who was being hit was not going to take it. What's going on? Isn't the Rulong group very powerful now? Us 3 brothers impersonating this extreme Dao organization to rob people should be able to scare a lot of people, right? Why aren't they giving face to a little girl? Looking at the little girl who was jumping up and down because of the pain, the 3 brothers who called themselves Dragon, Tiger, and Leopard finally couldn't take it anymore. One of them reached out to grab Colored Glaze. Suddenly, Dancing Costume, who was hiding in the distance, couldn't help but angrily say, "Damn it! These guys actually dared to hurt the young Miss Hand. They deserve to die." But before Dancing Costume could angrily rush over to protect the young miss, Bunny Ball suddenly reached out to stop her. "You are." Just when Dancing Costume was wondering why Bunny Ball didn't let her attack, the situation over there changed again. Just when one of the hooligans' hand was about to grab Colored Glaze, A white shadow inserted itself between the two like lightning and landed a punch on the stinky hand that was reaching out. Crack. On the other side, Colored Glaze was just about to hold her head and crouch down when she suddenly heard the crisp sound of bones breaking, followed by a miserable scream like a crushed grasshopper. Everything happened too quickly. The hooligan who reached out his hand didn't even have time to react before a burst of intense pain washed over his nerves. At the same time, his hand seemed to fly out. Oh, ah! My hand! Ah! After the earth-shattering punch, the 5 fingers that were originally outstretched like an eagle's claw were twisted beyond recognition. It looked like some kind of postmodern art piece. The culprit who caused all of this was only a delicate doll-like beauty. She looked petite, her silver hair was like snow, and she wore light sportswear. When she hit someone, she didn't hesitate at all. Stinky trash. With this little ability, you dare to come out and take liberties with an innocent woman. Are you tired of living? Under Colored Glaze's stupefied gaze, Dunya, who came out of nowhere, shook her small wrist, a trace of disdain appearing in her eyes. Dong. Dunya? Wait a moment, let me clean up the trash first. Dunya didn't even turn her head as she snorted at Colored Glaze. Following that, her petite figure quickly rushed towards the 2 hooligans who didn't know what was going on. What followed was a violent beating that made Colored Glaze's heart palpitate. Colored Glaze found it hard to imagine that Dunya's small body was actually so strong and could be so ruthless when hitting people. At most 10 seconds passed. The 3 hooligans fell to the ground. Some even fainted from the intense pain and injuries. Their injuries were so severe that it was almost certain that they would be permanently disabled. But this was already the result of Dunya's mercy. After all, with Dunya's current strength and killing intent, if she was a little more serious, the floor would have already turned into a sea of blood. That scene would have been very bad. After quickly dealing with these hooligans, Dunya turned her head towards Colored Glaze, raised her eyebrows and said, "Are you okay? Why are you running around here by yourself? This kind of situation is quite rare." For Dunya, encountering Colored Glaze was a complete accident. It was just that when she was running to the next location after school, she happened to run to this street and happened to see Luli being pestered by these 3 hooligans. Therefore, she casually made a move. Although Dunya was just passing by, it was a fact that she saved Colored Glaze. Colored Glaze hurriedly nodded and thanked her. "I'm fine. Thank you very much." "No need to thank me. But a young lady like you shouldn't be out here alone. You should go home quickly." Dunya sized up Colored Glaze, shook her head slightly, and then turned to leave. Whether it was in terms of body size or age, Dunya was younger than Colored Glaze. But when faced with an unexpected situation like just now, her method of dealing with it was much more effective than Colored Glaze. And her attitude was also much calmer. Other than the previous Ryudo kidnapping incident and the $1 billion chase night, Dunya's personality was naturally more outspoken and more independent, so she looked more mature in this kind of situation. Seeing that Dunya was about to leave, Colored Glaze hurriedly chased after her, ran to her side and asked, Wait, you, where are you going now? Can I go with you?" Speaking of which, Colored Glaze wasn't very familiar with Dunya, and the 2 of them didn't even like each other. But at this moment where she just experienced the betrayal of her mother and future boyfriend, and met with bad people, even if it was just being with someone who couldn't be considered a friend, it would make Colored Glaze's mood slightly better. So she didn't mind taking the initiative to talk to Dunya, and even walked behind her. Whether it was shopping, at least she would have someone to accompany her for the time being, so she wouldn't be alone. However, Dunya wasn't going shopping, but gave an answer that Colored Glaze never expected. She casually replied as she walked, "I'm actually planning to challenge the dojo. Are you interested in this too?" Challenge the dojo. Hearing this term that seemed to have popped out from a parallel universe, Colored Glaze was stunned. What she knew about the dojo challenge were usually martial artists who went to other dojos to challenge them in order to test their own martial arts level. This was called dojo challenge. But this term used on Dunya was a bit strange. You're a 15-year-old high school girl, and such a cute little loli. It's fine if you don't participate in any activities to enjoy your youth, but you're actually going to challenge the dojo after school? Although Dunya had already changed into sportswear, this term didn't match her at all. But in fact, Dunya wasn't lying. Challenging the dojo was already a daily occurrence for her these days. Since a few weeks ago when she experienced the night of hunting with Ryudo, Dunya understood how weak she was, and also understood how laughable her past arrogance was. Whether it was to protect oneself, or to protect others, one must have sufficient strength to do so. So Dunya recently learned Saido-style martial arts from her father, Wu Hong, while occasionally finding a place to challenge the dojo to hone her combat experience. When she told these things to Colored Glaze, Dunya's body emitted a calm demeanor, unique to martial artists. If the Dunya that Colored Glaze knew before was just a capricious and fake young lady, who wore a mask every day, then now she had grown into a real martial artist. After a bear cub experienced life and death hunting, it would quickly grow into a majestic bear. The current Dunya was the same. But a young lady like you probably wouldn't understand. After all, your life seems very leisurely. After telling her experience, Dunya glanced at Colored Glaze and walked towards the building not far away. There seemed to be a rather famous karate dojo there, which was why Dunya came. My life seems very leisurely. After being told this by Dunya, Colored Glaze instinctively wanted to refute. But when the words came to her mouth, she couldn't say a word. She could only follow Dunya numbly. This soulless walking posture was like a portrayal of Colored Glaze's life. Chapter 196. Indeed, compared to the others, Colored Glaze's daily life was indeed very leisurely. Ryudo was busy every day with Rulong Group and Rulong Security Company. He also had to find time to beat up hooligans and earn money in the battle arena. From time to time, he also had to accompany the little ancestors. He was so busy that he didn't even have time to sleep. Yunyan was also fighting every day for her dream of becoming a novelist. Although her struggle hadn't ended, she had been working hard to walk down this path until she could see the dawn of the future. Dunya wasn't to be outdone. She went to school during the day, and after school in the afternoon, she didn't do anything but run straight to the dojo. At night, she had to practice martial arts under her father's guidance. Her days were very fulfilling. But what about Colored Glaze? What did Colored Glaze usually do? She just went to school every day and helped Ryudo when he had something to ask of her. When she had nothing to do, she would go home to practice calligraphy, read books, learn some music, tea ceremony, and so on. Although on the surface it seemed that Colored Glaze had a lot to do every day, these things weren't what Colored Glaze wanted to do at all. They were purely playthings to pass the time. What dreams do I have? What kind of person do I want to be? What direction should I strive towards? Colored Glaze had never thought about these questions. It wasn't that she didn't think about it, but that she didn't even think about it. After all, in Colored Glaze's subconscious mind, she was still the unlucky person who was sent to be a vegetarian king at the age of 18. When she came out, she was already close to 50 years old. Dreams? Future? These words had nothing to do with Lioli's life in the first place. Her future was just bleak. With this kind of thinking, although this young miss of Kamiyoshi had outstanding ability and amazing potential, she always muddled through every day. Every day was boring and meaningless. However, Ryudo's appearance had already given her the power to have dreams and a future. If Seiji was able to truly take control of his own Naruto empire in a year's time, and completely destroy the high and mighty Shinto system, the position of vegetarian king, that restricted the Kanzaki family, would also disappear. Of course, if they wanted to destroy the Shinto system, they would have to face many enemies in addition to the Kanzaki family. After all, this was essentially an act of digging up the country's roots. They would have to become enemies with more than half of the country. So to do this, Ryudo had to put in a lot of effort and bet his life many times. But up until now, Lioli's future had always depended on dragon fight. She rarely took the initiative to fight for herself and only waited for others to summon her. She was like a human-shaped box of tricks that would come at the drop of a hat. Am I really going to go on like this? What should I do? Seeing Dunya walk into the Rosin Club karate dojo with her head held high, Colored Glaze couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. But when she followed Dunya into the karate dojo, Colored Glaze's shame disappeared, only leaving behind astonishment. Ha! 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 Another 30 rounds of straight punches. You bunch of trash. Grit your teeth and persevere. Otherwise die. The time now was around 4:30 in the afternoon. Hundreds of students were sweating profusely in this Rosin Club karate dojo, unceasingly honing their techniques, under the request of the teachers. Hundreds of people shouted one after another. A large group of fierce men wearing karate clothes unceasingly punched and raised their legs. The teachers holding the pointer scolded and fought. The scene was very spectacular. Isn't this the Rosin Club? This is the dojo famous for its actual combat karate? Dunya is planning to challenge this place? However, just when Colored Glaze was surprised, Dunya walked into the door of the karate dojo and went straight to the place where the students were training. Before Luli could react, she said to the hundreds of people present in a clear voice, "Who is the person who is the best at fighting here? Please come out and spar with me." This is so direct. After hearing Dunya's words, Colored Glaze couldn't help but take a deep breath. Then she turned her head and looked at the group of martial artists who collectively stopped their training because of this sentence, and slightly stepped back, as if afraid of being beaten up. Generally speaking, suddenly rushing in when people are training and asking to spar with the best fighter should be quite rude. So Colored Glaze initially thought that the people in the dojo would be angry and mercilessly kick the two of them out or something. However, what she didn't expect was that the people in this Rosin Club seemed to be very familiar with this kind of scene. They were not surprised at all, but quickly made the corresponding preparations. Da-da-da, da-da-da. Under Colored Glaze's stunned gaze, hundreds of students separated neatly to the left and right, divided into two, leaving a large space in the center of the dojo. The brawny man who was waving the pointer just now glanced at Dunya and said in a deep voice, "Is it you? The young lady of the Saito family, who recently took down many dojo's signboards, the monster known as the Silver Violent Bear." See, I'm quite famous in this area." After hearing the teacher's words, Dunya turned her head and showed a proud smile to Colored Glaze. Recently, a very rare thing was circulating in Yodo's martial arts world. That was a girl who looked at most 12 or 13 years old. Dunya, I'm 15 years old. The little girl was constantly challenging the dojo. Generally speaking, for these martial artists, challenging each other's dojo was a common occurrence. However, such a young dojo challenger was truly rare. What made this rumor even more interesting was that this little loli was actually the daughter of Saito Takahiro, the current dojo master of Saito Club, and her strength was very strong. She had defeated many strong enemies. Of course, when Luli heard this strange conversation, she couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Wait, what the hell is Silver Violent Bear? Dunya, you don't have any objections to this title at all. Indeed, Dunya didn't have any objection to this title at all. She even liked it. After all, she was a little bear that came from a land of ice and snow. Although she was young, the nature of the bear in her bones was natural. Under this strange atmosphere, the first black belt of Rosin Dojo stood in front of the Silver Violent Bear. Rosin Dojo was a karate sect that focused on actual combat. All the techniques were used for actual combat. To be able to obtain a black belt in such a place, his strength must be quite outstanding. However, it was useless. Furamaki-style martial art, Tiger Fall. Just as the black belt cultivator was about to punch out, Dunya's petite body had already flashed forward, and her fist landed squarely on the middle of his torso. Saito-style Palea martial art, Lightning Hand. Following that, her slender hand gathered strength and fiercely grabbed the black belt's chin from below. The might of this strike was extremely domineering. From the bottom to the top, it actually caused the body that weighed 170 to 80 kilograms to rise a meter into the air. Dunya casually caught the unconscious black belt and placed him on the ground. She turned to the dumbfounded crowd and said, "Next one, a stronger one. This is the legendary silver violent bear? It really lives up to its name." After the first black belt was cleanly defeated, Rasen Dojo also realized the seriousness of the situation and started to take action. Dunya's second opponent was a normal generation, but his strength was limited. Under the pressure of the silver violent bear's superhuman strength and speed, he could only hold on for a few minutes. However, when the third opponent, which was the normal generation with the teaching staff, came out, the situation changed. As the normal generation of Rasen Dojo, this middle-aged man had experienced no less than 1,000 battles in his life. He could be said to be a true Tao-seeking type of person who devoted his life to exploring the endless martial arts domain. His physical condition was at the peak of his life. In terms of combat experience and martial arts attainment, he completely crushed Dunya. In an instant, the little bear felt an immense pressure. After 10 minutes of difficult resistance, Dunya finally fell to the ground with a plop, smashing a large hole in the floor of the dojo. Damn, a normal generation is really strong. If I can't kill him, it won't be easy to defeat him. It didn't take long for Dunya and Lioli, who had just suffered a defeat, to walk on the street at dusk. Dunya's slightly purple face was still chattering as if she were the final victor. Although she didn't defeat the strongest person in Rasen Dojo, Dunya didn't look dispirited at all. Instead, she excitedly talked about when and how she planned to get back at him. Seeing the visible bruises and swelling on her body, Colored Glaze couldn't help but ask, "Dunya, you took so many punches. Doesn't it hurt?" "What nonsense are you talking about? Go up and take a few punches. I broke a few bones." No. But if it hurts, why do you have to go to this extent?" Colored Glaze looked up and down at Dunya, as if she couldn't understand her thoughts. Normally, a normal girl would cry and complain to someone after being beaten, but Dunya obviously wouldn't. She acted as if nothing had happened. To this question, Dunya straightforwardly replied, "Of course it's because I want to become stronger as soon as possible. If I don't push myself to the limit, how can I grow?" "Become stronger? Is this very important?" "It's very important. You know about the assassination attempt on my dad, right?" Suddenly, Dunya raised her head slightly and looked at the sky where the golden afterglow of the sun shone down from above. Colored Glaze obviously knew about the assassination attempt on Saito Takahiro by the Tenmu Group's secret department, so she replied with an N. "Actually, I was there when my dad was assassinated, but my first reaction at that time was to run away. I was like a piece of trash." Hearing the words "run away" and "trash," Colored Glaze couldn't help but tremble. Because not long ago, Colored Glaze also chose to run away when she saw the scene of Ryuto and Ruehui hugging. Actually, if she thought about it carefully, it wasn't hard to think that there might be some misunderstanding. The two of them shouldn't have any special relationship, or even if there was, they wouldn't mess around in the Kamishiro courtyard. But Colored Glaze didn't even have the courage to understand all of this. She instinctively chose to be a piece of trash and ran away. At this time, Dunya didn't notice the shock in Colored Glaze's eyes. Instead, she said, "So later, I decided that no matter what happens in the future, I will never run away. For this, breaking a few bones is nothing." Chapter 197. Willpower was something that couldn't be explained clearly. Intellect, constitution, courage, insight, charisma. No matter which attribute it was, it couldn't be used to measure a person's willpower. As for the invisible attribute of willpower, it just so happened that it was one of the key factors that determined whether or not a person could unleash their full potential. Even if a person's 5 body parts were perfect, if their willpower wasn't strong enough, they still wouldn't be able to unleash their full potential. Colored Glaze was the perfect example of this theory. Was Colored Glaze's brain working well? Was her IQ high? Of course, there was no doubt about that. But the problem was that Colored Glaze didn't have the willpower to match her intelligence. Her willpower was extremely weak, and she was basically at the level of run when there's trouble, and stay where you are if you can't run. Colored Glaze in the original Red photo album too. No Survivors was the same. In the first half of the game, she was like a rich young lady who didn't have any opinions of her own. She was forced to participate in most of the events. She was like a rubber ball that would move with every kick. However, she would experience a huge transformation halfway through the game. And the event that caused that transformation was Ruehui's death. Ruehui Kanzaki was without a doubt the backbone of Colored Glaze, and even the entire Kamiyoshi clan. As long as her mother was there was nothing that couldn't be solved. Colored Glaze always believed that. But after Ruehui's death, the backbone of Colored Glaze's heart disappeared. Her mother's departure, coupled with the Kamiyoshi clan's internal and external troubles, and the Tenmu group's covetous gaze, finally pushed this young lady's mental state to the limit. As the saying went, a cornered dog would jump over a wall, and Colored Glaze would bite when cornered. And so, not long after Ruehui's death, Colored Glaze completely got rid of her weak willpower and lack of initiative. Her willpower became stronger, and she began to see the big picture and act in all directions. From that moment onwards, Kanzaki Colored Glaze truly displayed his true strength as an SSR-ranked companion. Especially in the last part of the plot where Colored Glaze and Ayam had a one-on-one duel. The strategy and willpower she displayed were not below that of her mother, Ruehui, and she brought a lot of trouble to Ayam. Even Ayam, who was unruly and arrogant, had no choice but to admit that this little princess was the second biggest opponent in her life. She regretted not taking advantage of the fact that she had not gotten rid of her when she was still young. However, in today's world, Ryudo did not intend to let Ruehui's death happen. In that case, would Colored Glaze lose the opportunity to transform? That might not be the case. After all, Colored Glaze's luck was pretty good. As she ran, she would encounter a growing silver bear. So after Dunya ran to see the doctor with a bruised face, Colored Glaze strolled alone on the streets of Tokyo at night. She walked very, very slowly. Judging from her posture, the girl wasn't shopping, nor was she trying to go somewhere. She was just walking. Why was she walking? She was walking to think. What was she thinking about? She was thinking about her future. Am I someone with a future? The Colored Glaze from before didn't dare to think in this direction. The more beautiful the future was, the more tragic it would be when it was stabbed in the back by the cold reality. That was why Colored Glaze had always muddled along and habitually avoided it. Even after she made a 2-year promise with Ryudo, she still didn't dare to take it to heart. Did she really not need to be a vegetarian king in 2 years? Did she really not need to be locked up in a cage like a canary? Ryudo's answer was that she really didn't need to. And apart from saying it, Ryudo was also working towards this goal from various angles. In just a few months, Ryudo and his forces had undergone earth-shattering changes. If Ryudo, who kidnapped Colored Glaze in the seaside warehouse, was just a gangster who didn't know the rules, then he could be said to be in Tokyo. Now he could be considered the extreme Dao master of Tokyo. His subordinates were strong and powerful, and his forces were intertwined. Even the Kamikaze clan had to look at him seriously. In the past few months, Colored Glaze had to admit that Ryudo did a really good job and worked very hard. But what about herself? What did Colored Glaze do for this 2-year promise? Indeed, Colored Glaze also acted as Ryudo's backing in many matters, and helped him a lot. But that was purely passive help. If Ryudo encountered specific difficulties, he would go to Colored Glaze, and Colored Glaze could help solve it. But if Ryudo didn't go to Colored Glaze, she would just sit aside and watch. This had happened many times before. I'm not very familiar with him, so there's no need to get too involved in his affairs. Colored Glaze always lied to herself like this. But was that really the case? That wasn't the case. Colored Glaze clearly knew that she was just afraid of making the first choice. She never took the initiative to contact Ryudo, because she didn't have this habit. She never took the initiative to intervene in the business of Rulong Group and Rulong Security Company, because she didn't have this habit. She never took the initiative to communicate with her mother, because she didn't have this habit. Even in Colored Glaze's eyes, she was quite a weak existence, especially compared to Dunya, who was willing to risk her life in order to become stronger. The two formed a stark contrast. Just as Colored Glaze's mind was undergoing such a violent storm of thoughts, Dancing Costume finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Is Missy okay? She's been walking for more than an hour. She's never walked such a long distance in her life. If she continues like this, her legs will break. Dancing Costume hid behind and secretly watched Missy's figure continuously walking forward. She had a pained expression on her face, as if she wanted to go over and carry her. I don't think she'll break her legs after walking for an hour. Missy isn't made of glass. Rabbit Ball silently complained in his mind, but his expression was much more relaxed than Dancing Costume's. Obviously, compared to Dancing Costume, Rabbit Ball, who had more life experience, could understand Missy's current state better. Self-doubt, self-denial, and even self-loathing. To some people this could be a destructive blow, but to others, it could be a sign of transformation. From Rabbit Ball's point of view, Missy wasn't so weak that she would destroy herself over such a small matter. Therefore, after experiencing this incident, the young mistress would definitely become stronger and more successful. Aha! So annoying. But just as Rabbit Ball was thinking that Missy would definitely become more mature, Colored Glaze, who was walking in front, covered her head with her hands and roared angrily on the street. This sharp roar startled the people on both sides of the street, and they all looked in the direction of this young girl. Hearing Colored Glaze's roar, Dancing Costume immediately rushed over, while Rabbit Ball was stunned. No way. I just said that Missy wasn't that kind of person, and now you're slapping me in the face? Dancing Costume immediately ran to Colored Glaze's side, and held her shoulders while shaking her left and right. Missy, don't scare me. Are you okay? Colored Glaze reached out and slapped Dancing Costume's hand away, then said indifferently, Let go, you're shaking me to death. Okay, I'll let go. Actually, it's already late. Let's go home first, okay? Go home? I'll go back, but not now. Hearing this, Colored Glaze slowly raised her head and then said in a serious tone, Before going home, I have something to do. Ah, where are you going? I'm going to Roulon Group HQ. Prepare the car immediately. Ah, going to Roulon Group HQ? After hearing Missy's request, Dancing Costume couldn't help but gulp. She roughly knew why Missy left home in a fit of anger, but Missy said that she was going to Roulon Group HQ. That was the home of that heartless Ryuto Kiryu. Could it be? Missy is going to cut off all ties with that bastard? Thinking of this, Dancing Costume was first shocked, then a trace of joy secretly surged in her heart. If that's the case, then it's fine. That stinky hooligan said that he likes Missy, but at the same time, he's together with Madam. It's definitely not a good match, so it's fine if it's broken. So Dancing Costume hurriedly stopped a car from the side of the road, took out a check, and bought the car on the spot, then drove Colored Glaze in the direction of Roulon Group HQ. At night, Kamadachi was brightly lit. Gaudy neon signs were piled up everywhere, as if they didn't cost money. Many handsome men and beautiful women were also walking around with their arms around each other's shoulders. The whole street was filled with a romantic and unrestrained atmosphere. However, at the end of Kamadachi, where Roulon Group HQ was located, the atmosphere nearby was much quieter and more solemn. Not long after, Colored Glaze stepped out of the car and walked toward the huge Japanese-style courtyard. The bright door at the entrance was full of grandeur. A plaque with the words Roulon hung on the door frame, letting people know whose territory this was at first glance. After Lioli took large strides to the door, she first snorted coldly, then lifted her slender right leg and kicked at the door with great familiarity, before her feet, which were clad in stockings and leather shoes, could touch the door. Bunny Ball had already struck out with his palm and blasted the heavy door open, to prevent the young mistress from covering her feet and jumping around again. Rumble! A huge muffled sound was transmitted into the house inside. The Roulon Group members who were originally in the hall and the surrounding rooms were also shocked by the movement at the door. A minute later, Consultant Fujiki rushed to the door with dozens of Roulon Group members. But when he saw Colored Glaze, Bunny Ball, and Dancing Costume swaggering in, he couldn't help but be very surprised. Regarding Colored Glaze, young Master Ryudo's friend, Fujiki definitely knew her. But he didn't expect Colored Glaze to suddenly kick the door at around 7 o'clock. That, Missy Colored Glaze? Today you are. Don't call me Missy Colored Glaze. Just when Consultant Fujiki walked over in confusion, Colored Glaze solemnly extended her hand to him, and then said something that made everyone's brain boil. From today onwards, I'm no longer Missy Colored Glaze, but the big sister of Rulong Group. All of you better remember this. Understand? What? In an instant, Fujiki was dumbfounded, Bunny Ball was dumbfounded, Dancing Costume was dumbfounded, and dozens of other Rulong Group members were also dumbfounded. What the hell is this? Chapter 198. From today onwards, I'm no longer Lady Colored Glaze. I'm the big sister of the Rulong Group. All of you better remember this, do you understand? Colored Glaze's words were indeed shocking, because if Fujiki didn't misunderstand, this lady came here today to rebel against Ryudo? As everyone knew in Kyoto, Big Sister referred to the female leader of a gang. In other words, Colored Glaze rushed into the Rulong Group HQ and asked to be the female leader of the Rulong Group, as if she wanted to have the same status as Ryudo. Even if Consultant Fujiki wanted to help Colored Glaze give a proper explanation. But, what's there to explain? Isn't this King Rebellion? You're a lady of the Kamiyoshi clan. And you came here to rebel against the young master of the Rulong Group, in the middle of the night? You want to steal his power? Because this situation was too magical, Consultant Fujiki didn't even know how to react. Not only him, the dancing costume beside him was also stunned, and quickly ran over to ask, Miss, lady, what are you talking about? Nothing special, I'm just asking for my legitimate rights. Legitimate? How is that legitimate? Anyway, I'll be the wife of the Rulong Group leader in a little over a year. So what's wrong with being a big sister now? Isn't this normal? A little over a year later? Like being the wife of the Rulong Group leader? If Lu Li's inexplicable big sister's proclamation had already made their brains boil, then this team leader's wife's proclamation had shocked them so much that they almost died on the spot. Before Tozai Kazuma left the country to seek refuge, he had already officially passed the position of the Rulong Group leader to Ryudo. Colored Glaze declared that she would be the wife of the Rulong Group leader in a little over a year, which was equivalent to announcing that she would marry Ryudo in a little over a year. This is too bold, isn't it? Is this really the lady of the Kamiyoshi clan? Such an impactful statement naturally made everyone, including Consultant Fujiki, at a loss of what to do. They didn't know what to do for a moment. It was said that everyone also felt that young Master Long Do was a little interested in Miss Liuli. But this girl openly ran over to the man's house and said such words in front of so many family members. Wasn't this a little too bold? But no matter what, since Colored Glaze claimed to be the future wife of the Rulong Group, Consultant Fujiki didn't dare to slight her. This old man could only respectfully invite the future wife of the Rulong Group in. At the same time, he hurriedly contacted the Rulong Security Company leader. What's this? Say that again. Half a minute later, Ryudo, who was in the manager's office of the Rulong Security Company, held the phone in his hand. His face revealed a shocked expression, as if the end of the world and the end of the universe had come together. I'm sorry, although it's hard to believe, but Lady Colored Glaze. Cough, but Big Sister really said that. On the other side of the phone, Consultant Fujiki wanted to say the words Miss Liuli out of habit. However, after being glared at by Lu Li, who was staring at him from the side, he hurriedly changed back to Big Sister, which was a very unique way of addressing her. At the same time, in the room, Sensible and Gao Yuan were sitting at the table discussing some official business. Who knew that they would see Ryudo, who was holding the phone, performing a strange face-changing show. The muscles on his face were constantly squirming, like some kind of mysterious creature. Sometimes he wanted to laugh, sometimes he wanted to cry, sometimes he was shocked, sometimes he was sluggish, sometimes. In short, he was constantly changing various expressions. It was as if he was talking to a Martian on the other side of the phone. What's wrong with the boss? It's hard to say, but I don't think it's anything serious. Just as Sensible and Gao Yuan were watching the boss face-changing show while organizing the documents, not long after, Ryudo finally hung up the phone. Then he immediately said to his two companions, "Sorry, I have something to do. I have to go home quickly." Before he finished, his figure rushed out of the office like lightning and rushed downstairs to the garage. "It's too weird, it's really too weird." Long Do called Uncle Fujiwara, the king of street racers, and called him over. Then, he sped towards the headquarters of the Dragon Group at a crazy speed. Long Do was completely dumbfounded. Colored Glaze not only ran to the Rulong Group headquarters, but she also claimed to be the future wife of the group leader. This kind of attitude was really beyond Ryudo's expectations. After all, well, he and Mrs. Ruehue were caught red-handed by Colored Glaze. This situation was indeed embarrassing. Although Ryudo accidentally took a nap because he was too sleepy, he didn't actually take the initiative to do anything. So from a rational point of view, this matter couldn't be blamed on Ryudo. But for a teenage girl, it should be impossible for her to be rational about such a sensitive issue. Ryudo had long been prepared for Colored Glaze to lose her temper. Whether it was scolding, hitting or cutting off all ties, Ryudo would accept it and find a way to coax her back. But what he never expected was that Colored Glaze actually took such a drastic measure and directly went to Ryudo's house. Indeed, Ryudo and Colored Glaze had a 2-year agreement. The two agreed that after 2 years, if Colored Glaze could regain her freedom, she would go to the Rulong Group and become the wife of the group leader. But wasn't this agreement still more than a year away? Why was Colored Glaze so fast? Why did she suddenly become so proactive? This kind of thing was impossible for the previous Colored Glaze, but for the current Colored Glaze, it might not be the case. When Ryudo returned to the Rulong Group's headquarters, a group of craftsmen stood outside the simple solid wood door, repairing the door. In addition, there were dozens of strong men wearing black suits and pink heart-shaped hats. Under the lead of Kamita, who was holding a bouquet of flowers, they were waiting for their boss's return. This description wasn't an exaggeration at all. It really was dozens of strong men, wearing black suits following behind a man holding a bouquet of flowers. Their suits were well ironed, and they wore dark sunglasses on their noses. Their neatly groomed crew-cut heads were all wearing pink hats with heart-shaped patterns on them. The most flirtatious thing was that in the middle of the big hearts, the name Ryudo Kiryu X Colored Glaze was written with a black oil pen. After Ryudo staggered out of the car, the group of strong men immediately rushed over and respectfully bowed to their boss. "Congratulations! Congratulations! May boss and big sis be together forever. May the child be born early. May the old white come to an end." What kind of prank is this? When this group of strong men in black suits shouted congratulatory words, their hands neatly clapped, and at the same time, Kamita also handed the bouquet of flowers in his hand to Ryudo. He really wanted to dig a hole and bury himself in it. Shame, it's really too shameful. Obviously, after Kamita knew that his boss had big sis, he immediately organized a group of people to congratulate his boss at the door. This should be a spontaneous congratulatory behavior. And at the same time, he also wanted to flatter his boss. It was just that this guy's taste and culture were obviously at a level that made people speechless. So he came up with something that looked like a prank show. It made Ryo look like a pranked groom in a prank show. Even so, Long Do didn't have the time to deal with this group of idiots. He punched Momo in the face and strode into the house. He happened to see advisor Fujiki standing outside the living room with his hand on his forehead. So he quickly asked, "Uncle Fujiki, where is Colored Glaze?" "Big sis is in your room. She said you can go alone." Colored Glaze is in my room? She wants me to go alone? No way." The moment he heard this sentence, Ryudo's face became obviously worse. A man and a woman alone together in a man's room. This was originally a very youthful and hormonal scene, as well as a scene that would make people feel restless. Of course, the premise was that the girl wasn't angry right now, and didn't have any intention of physically destroying the boy. Colored Glaze's body is so weak. She shouldn't be able to cut me with a hatchet, right? I have copper skin and iron bones. With a fluke mentality, Ryudo fearfully returned to his room door. And Dancing Costume, who was guarding the door, angrily glared at him. Originally, Dancing Costume thought that Big Sis came here to completely cut off all relations with Ryudo. But in the end, Big Sis didn't know what went wrong in her brain. She actually started to think of herself as the wife of the group leader. It was simply the most ridiculous thing in the world. So, how could Dancing Costume be in a good mood at this time? It would be strange if she was in a good mood. She was the one who wanted to swing the hatchet the most. But no, Dancing Costume couldn't do that. She could only coldly snort and say, "Humph. Go in." Today was a good day to die. After pushing open the door to his room, Ryudo felt for the first time that this familiar building looked like the stomach of an evil dragon. As if he would be melted by the stomach acid if he went in. After opening the door, the first thing he saw was a figure sitting upright in the middle of the room. It was Colored Glaze, the Colored Glaze sitting alone in Ryudo's room, giving off the feeling that she was the owner of the room. Because the girl's back was facing him, Ryudo couldn't see her facial expression, so he couldn't determine whether it would be a hatchet or poison. "You're here?" When Ryudo pushed open the door and closed it from the inside, Colored Glaze slowly stood up and asked in an unfathomable tone, "This feeling, it's not right. I should use my trump card." Seeing that the situation was not right, Ryudo said in a very powerful tone, "Cough cough. Colored Glaze, what do you want? Just say it. I'll apologize to you. I'm sorry." Chapter 199. A man should be able to go out in the hall, get into bed, be a boss, and be willing to put down his pride. Moreover, Colored Glaze was his future wife. What was the big deal about apologizing to his wife? This wasn't showing weakness. It was an act of loving his wife. That's all. However, unfortunately, Ryudo's apology did not have any reaction. Colored Glaze's slender neck turned slightly, half of her head tilted, and asked in a calm but powerful tone, "What do I want? Do you really want to know?" "Of course, if you want to kill me, just say the word. My head will be as big as a bowl." "Very well. Then let's be clear. I want to be the world's #1 extreme madam." "What?" For a moment, Ryudo was stunned. He even thought there was something wrong with his ears. After a moment, he asked in confusion, "The world's #1 arrest madam? What kind of joke is this, extreme madam? That's what you're doing now." Colored Glaze turned her head completely and walked steadily to Ryudo, trying to put on a high and mighty look as she looked up at him. Ryudo's height was about 1.8 meters, which was quite tall, but Colored Glaze was only 1.6 meters. Therefore, the scene of her looking up at Ryudo with a high and mighty look looked very pitiful. After realizing the difference in height between her and Ryudo, Colored Glaze raised her eyebrows and gestured for him to get down. At this time, Colored Glaze's body was filled with a strong aura of superiority. Ryudo could only sit cross-legged on the ground, intending to listen to what this big sister had to say. After finally being able to look down at Ryudo, Colored Glaze nodded in satisfaction. Then the girl put her hands on her hips, straightened her back, and said seriously, "My previous personality was more lazy. I didn't have much initiative, you know this, right?" "I know. Even if you know, it's none of my business. But this version of myself makes me feel disgusted, so I've decided to change. I'll start by finding my life's goal," Miss Colored Glaze said proudly as she flipped her hair. With a goal, there would be motivation. With motivation, people would have a strong will, and would no longer be lazy. This was what Colored Glaze had learned. Hearing this, Ryudo gulped and asked doubtfully, "Then the target you found is?" "I, Kanzaki Colored Glaze, will become the world's #1 Majorei." Suddenly, Colored Glaze said in an impassioned tone, "I must become the Hokage," or, "I am the man who will become the Pirate King," which sounded quite hot-blooded at first. But this goal of hers, when she thought about it carefully, was very strange. After all, what the hell was the world's #1 extreme madam? This wasn't some glorious title. It was more like being a prisoner ready to be sent to prison at any time. But before Ryudo could recover from his shock, Colored Glaze pointed at him and said, "In order for me to achieve my goal, I must support you to become the world's #1 extreme madam. Do you understand? What? What does this have to do with me? Ah, so that's how it is. Suddenly, Ryudo seemed to understand Colored Glaze's logic. From her perspective, her goal of leaving the Kamiyoshi clan in a year or so was something she had to accomplish. In other words, she would definitely marry into the Rulon group and become Ryudo's wife. Since she was going to become an extreme madam, Colored Glaze didn't want to be an ordinary extreme madam. She wanted to be the world's #1 extreme madam. For the aimless Colored Glaze, she wanted to use this to light up a beacon of light for her future. Although it could also be a beacon of light, it didn't matter. After all, even if this sounded ridiculous, for the current Colored Glaze, this was already the only life goal she could think of. If she couldn't leave the control of the Kamiyoshi clan, then she could only become the Zhaiwang. If she wanted to leave the control of the Kamiyoshi clan, then she had to marry Ryudo and become the Rulon group's wife. Obviously, compared to being the Zhaiwang, being the Rulon group's wife was better. Moreover, the Rulon group's wife could be upgraded to the world's #1 group leader's wife. After understanding Colored Glaze's meaning, Ryudo couldn't help but laugh. What, in the end? You still want to become my wife? Isn't that simple? You can do it now. Who said we should aim for something like that? However, Luli raised her eyebrows when she heard this. Her face was filled with disdain. Don't you want to be the world's #1 extreme madam? Isn't that my wife? Don't misunderstand, you're just my stepping stone. What? Colored Glaze crossed her arms and said in a condescending tone. My goal is to become the world's #1 extreme madam. But you happen to have the potential to become the world's #1 extreme madam and save me from the palace. So I'm with you. It's that simple. What do you mean? Are you using me? That's right. So no matter what you do outside, it has nothing to do with me. I won't care about you. Don't care. Speaking of this, Luli emphasized the word messing around, as if she was hinting at the scene she saw this afternoon. Pfft. However, after hearing Colored Glaze's words, Ryudo couldn't help but laugh. Good heavens, this fellow had been beating around the bush for so long. But in the end, he was still jealous. Colored Glaze repeatedly emphasized that she and Ryudo were only using each other, because she was dissatisfied with the scene of Ryudo being so close to Ryudo and Ruehui. Colored Glaze wanted to break away from the country's control and not be the king of fast, so she had to rely on Ryudo. So it was difficult for her to separate from Ryudo in reality. Since it was impossible to separate them in reality, then it was better to separate them in spirit. Don't you like messing around outside? Then go do it, I'll ignore you. You be the world's #1 extreme madam, and I'll be the world's #1 extreme madam. Although we're in the same pond, we'll stay out of each other's way. You go through your sewer, and I go through mine. Humph. That's more or less what it means. After understanding what Colored Glaze was up to, Ryudo felt that her thoughts were a bit cute. She was like a little ostrich that wanted to bury its head in the ground and pretend that everything was calm outside. At this time, Colored Glaze was still standing straight. She raised her head high as she talked about her next step after becoming the world's #1 extreme madam. When the time comes, I'll destroy everything related to the King of Fast. I'll burn all the shrines, palaces, royal families, and palaces in this country. They're all trash remnants. It's very uncomfortable to look at. Ahem, the world's #1 extreme madam. Aren't you tired of standing and talking? What? Just as Colored Glaze was passionately talking about a bunch of distant plans, Ryudo suddenly grabbed her wrist and pulled forward, causing the girl's body to fall forward. Ugh! With a slight sound, Colored Glaze was pulled to the ground and into the arms of Ryudo, who was sitting cross-legged. You bastard, what are you? There's nothing between me and Lady Ruehui. I don't know if there will be in the future, but there's nothing now. I was too tired today and accidentally fell asleep. She should be the same. It's that simple. Just as Colored Glaze was about to flip out, Ryudo hugged her body and stopped her from moving. He looked straight into her slightly cloudy eyes and said in a serious tone, as the saying goes, A man is the most charming when he's serious. Ryudo's charm was already at LV4, an international level warrior. Now that he was serious, it naturally made people unable to stop themselves. Thump, 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 thump. So when Colored Glaze looked at his handsome face and seriously explained to her what happened, she couldn't help but feel her heart beat a lot faster. As expected, it's really like this. As I said, there's definitely nothing between him and Mother. Cough, cough, cough. But even though she was ecstatic, Colored Glaze still turned her head and said in an awkward tone, "What does it have to do with me if there's something between you and Mother? Anyway, I don't know where my father is. Even if you become my stepfather in the future, I don't mind." Oh, Ryudo smiled slightly. Really? Of course it's true. Well, after all, Lady Ruehue is so beautiful and has a good temperament. If that's the case, I can consider getting closer to her in the future. You. After hearing that this stinky pervert wanted to get closer to her mother, Colored Glaze couldn't help but turn her head and wanted to scold him. There's actually such a shameless person in the world. But before she could say anything, Ryudo had already leaned over and kissed this young lady's smooth little face. Although Colored Glaze's skin wasn't as white and tender as Dunia's, it was still as smooth as agar. The feeling of this kiss could be said to be quite wonderful. Suddenly being kissed on the cheek, Colored Glaze's body immediately stiffened. The scolding that she was about to blurt out was stuffed back into her throat. Her dumbstruck expression was very interesting, and the corners of Long Do's mouth curled up slightly in a doting smile. Then he smiled. "This is the first time I've kissed a girl's face. I've never done this with Yunyan, Dunia, and Lady Ruehue. Are you satisfied?" Long Do had learned this sudden sneak attack kiss and kiss technique from a romance novel written by senior sister Yunyan. No matter how unreasonable his girlfriend was, as long as he suddenly kissed her, it would be able to offset 90% of her anger. However, in the novel, the male protagonist kissed on the mouth. Ryudo was more embarrassed. He was too embarrassed to kiss Colored Glaze's little mouth, so he could only kiss on the face. Although it seemed to be effective, after realizing what was going on, Colored Glaze's white face suddenly flushed red. Even if it was just a kiss on the face and not on the mouth, this was an action that could only be done in a very intimate relationship. Therefore, Colored Glaze instinctively wanted to jump out of Ryudo's arms and turn around to run away. But the moment her instinct was about to activate, she suddenly remembered that she had already decided not to run away. That's right. Today, I just decided to take the initiative to deal with every day in the future. How can I run away because of a little thing? This won't do. I have to become more active. I can't always be messed up by this bastard and led by the nose. But what should I do specifically? That's right. Let's just do this. I'm going all out. Colored Glaze? Are you okay? Are you angry? However, Ryudo misunderstood Colored Glaze's hesitation and thought that it was a sign of anger. So he carefully leaned over and asked, wanting to see the expression on the face of this young lady, who had her head lowered. In the next second, Colored Glaze suddenly raised her head and leaned forward. At the moment when Ryudo didn't have time to react, chirp, he kissed her lips. Chapter 200. Ryudo was a steel-like virgin who could stand on his fists and walk on his arms. He was a pure and innocent man. Even in his past life as Lilan, this pure man had never been so intimate with a woman. Therefore, even though he had just kissed Colored Glaze's cheek, Ryudo already felt very embarrassed, not to mention this real kiss. When she kissed him, Colored Glaze actually felt like she had nothing left to lose. After all, she had just made up her mind to be a new person, and she couldn't accept being led by the nose by Ryudo again. Therefore, she wanted to do something that would surprise the other party. Didn't you suddenly kiss my cheek just now? Very well, if you can do that. Do you think I can't? You kissed the cheek, I kissed the mouth. Let's see who's more ruthless. Let's see who can't take it more. Come on. Let's fight. Therefore, in the same second, both of their first kisses were written off. There was one less steel-like man in the world who didn't get close to women. Ryudo really couldn't handle Colored Glaze's overly aggressive attack. This This is a girl's. His nose was filled with colored glaze's pleasant scent. Her moist pink lips were extremely soft to the touch, like a piece of milk-flavored pudding. The place where the two touched felt numb, as if an electric current was flowing through it. Ryudo, who had never experienced this before, was electrified. His heart started to beat faster, as if it was about to burst out of his chest. His hands that were originally hugging her were unconsciously flung to the side, and they started to tremble. His originally shifty eyes didn't even dare to look straight ahead. Instead, he rolled his eyes slightly. He was panicking. From all of Ryudo's current physical signs, it could be seen that he was really panicking. This kind of obvious panic on the surface made Colored Glaze, who was the one who initiated the attack, feel very satisfied. She even felt a strong sense of accomplishment in her heart. Humph. Ha 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 ha. You can't take it anymore, right? If it wasn't for the fact that Colored Glaze's mouth was busy, she would have mocked Ryudo mercilessly. What a useless fellow. Isn't it just this level of lip contact? Isn't it just? Just as Colored Glaze thought of the word lips in her mind, she unconsciously focused her senses on the area where the two of them were in contact. It was fine if she didn't think about it, but when she suddenly realized what kind of state the two of them were in, Colored Glaze realized that there was a tingling sensation on her mouth. Science said that friction could produce electricity, which meant that there was a scientific basis for this. Their lips rubbed against each other, generating a small amount of electricity. However, this small amount of electricity made Colored Glaze feel as if she had been thrown into a massage chair that was vibrating at level 10. The vibration made her entire body go soft. Why? It's just a little bit of lip contact. Why would I? Unknowingly, Colored Glaze's entire body became soft, and she fell forward like a noodle. After noticing the change in the young mistress, Ryudo quickly hugged her, but he didn't move his mouth away. At this time, whoever moved first would be the coward, and a man couldn't be the coward. Her warm and fragrant jade-like body was soft and boneless, and it was quite comfortable to hug. If the intimate contact of their faces was added, the feeling was even more irresistible. Waves of stronger electricity seemed to spread from the point of contact, wrapping the two of them in it. In terms of this kind of intimate contact, not only did Ryudo have no experience, Colored Glaze had even less experience, so she didn't have the right to laugh at him. But after all, Colored Glaze was a smart person, and Ryudo was an old pervert. So they quickly entered the state and gradually immersed themselves in this strange contact. The location was Ryudo's private bedroom. This kind of private place had a somewhat special atmosphere. Coupled with the intimate actions of the two, it caused the air to unknowingly become hotter and more sticky, filled with pink bubbles. After enjoying the soft touch of Luli's red lips, Long Do took a deep breath. He planned to make a mistake according to the description that he had read in novels and movies. He wanted to see if he could pry open a certain treasure and explore it. But just as he was about to do so, Colored Glaze suddenly opened her eyes wide, and her body bounced back like lightning and slapped Ryudo's face. Ryudo instinctively dodged the slap, and then smiled bitterly. Hey, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. Where's the gentleness just now? But Colored Glaze's expression was bristling with anger, and she scolded. You stinky pervert. What were you planning to do just now? You don't intend to do anything? I just reached in. Pooey. Blarg. Shameless pervert. Scum. $%. It was unknown which nerve of Colored Glaze was touched, but she began to angrily scold Ryudo, as if he had done something outrageous. After being scolded, Ryudo was a little puzzled. After all, you were the one who moved your mouth first, and I only leveled up a little. You don't have to be so angry, right? Could it be that I have bad breath? Ryudo breathed out and smelled his palms, and it felt fine. After all, he brushed his teeth 3 times a day, usually didn't eat garlic, and had the good habit of chewing gum. So he could only honestly ask, Sorry, I didn't know you would be so sensitive to this kind of thing. This only shows how perverted your heart is. That kind of thing can only be done by married couples. But you were the one who took the initiative to kiss me? I didn't open my mouth. What you did was crossing the line, crossing the line. Do you understand? You're shameless. After she was done scolding, Luli turned her head around and moved her body to lie on Longdo's bed, looking as if she was saying, "I'm angry." It had to be said that Colored Glaze's view of intimacy was a bit strange. At least, Ryudo couldn't understand it. Kissing the face, okay. Hugging, okay. Kissing, okay. Deep kissing, no. What kind of strange view of intimacy is this? Speaking of which, what is our relationship now? Fiancé and wife. Ryudo's fiancé is theoretically Dunya, right? And he and Colored Glaze didn't have any parental matchmaking. So where did the unmarried relationship come from? Boyfriend and girlfriend? Ryudo's girlfriend is actually Yunyen? And the two of them don't feel like they're a couple, but more like they're competing with each other. After thinking for a few seconds, Ryudo found a way to describe his relationship with Colored Glaze, Schrodinger's husband and wife. They weren't engaged because the two of them didn't have a marriage contract, only a verbal agreement. They weren't boyfriend and girlfriend because the two of them didn't confess and accept the confession process. Right now, Ryudo and Colored Glaze's relationship was like Schrodinger's cat locked in a box. They were constantly in a state of husband and wife, and stranger, which was really mysterious. But looking at Colored Glaze lying on his bed pretending to be dead, Ryudo felt slightly relieved. At first, when he accidentally slept with Madame Rue Hui and was seen by Colored Glaze, Ryudo thought that it was over, and that he would definitely walk into the worst possible ending. But he didn't expect that Colored Glaze seemed to have figured out something after jumping around outside, and suddenly showed signs of awakening. Especially that active personality. It was more like the capable and decisive Colored Glaze in the later part of the original work, not like the young lady in the early part of the work. Of course, Ryudo didn't expect Colored Glaze to take the initiative to the point of chirping. Although that feeling was pretty good. After thinking about the ecstasy just now, Ryudo couldn't help but lick his lips. He leaned on Colored Glaze's bed and asked with a smile, "As long as it's not too much, I can continue to kiss you in the future, right?" "Don't talk to me, stinky pervert, get out of here." Colored Glaze's pretty face blushed when she heard this, and she picked up the quilt next to her to cover her head. "I may need to remind you that you're in my room now, lying on my bed, and covered with my quilt. You want me to get out? That's not good, right? Humph. During the time when I run away from home, this room will be used by me." It seemed that after awakening, Colored Glaze's face became extraordinarily thick. At this time, she didn't feel a trace of shame for using Ryudo's room, as if it was natural. Run away from home. Hearing this, Ryudo raised his eyebrows and asked, "You really plan to run away from home?" Madame Rue Hui will be worried. She won't. Thinking about it carefully, this matter should be arranged by her. That old woman is the most insidious. Suddenly Colored Glaze, who poked her head out of the quilt, grinned, and there was a trace of displeasure in her tone. With Colored Glaze's current LV4, International Warrior level intelligence, it was easy for her to figure out the cause of the whole thing after calming down. Without a doubt, the reason why Colored Glaze saw the scene in the room before should be planned by Rue Hui herself. It was to use Ryudo to stimulate her and force her to grow up. This method was indeed very effective, even too effective. It even made Colored Glaze have a trace of resentment towards her old mother. And since she was born, it was the first time Colored Glaze used the adjective old woman to describe her mother. This was something she didn't even dare to think about before, even more so when she ran away from home. But now Colored Glaze's heart suddenly thought it through. As long as she was happy, she didn't care about anything else. So this time when I run away from home, I don't plan to go back so soon. I have to play here to my heart's content, humph. After chasing the long-winded Ryudo out of the room, Colored Glaze laid on the clean bed full of masculine scent. She unconsciously stretched her body in a very relaxed posture with a charming smile on her face. As for Ryudo, who was chased out of his room, he could only temporarily ask the servant to clean up a guest room and carefully move his things in. In this way, Colored Glaze's experience of the world's first extreme madam began, and her cohabitation life with Ryudo also began. Chapter 201. The next morning, Ryuto opened his eyes and saw an unfamiliar ceiling. Where is this? Did I cross over again? He first rubbed his eyes, then got up from the unfamiliar bed and stretched his body. Of course, Ryuto didn't cross over. It was just that the place he slept in last night was the guest room at home. An unfamiliar guest room, an unfamiliar bed, an unfamiliar ceiling, an unfamiliar wall. And the main culprit that caused all of this to happen was naturally the young miss of the Chow family who suddenly appeared. Speaking of which, Colored Glaze really did sleep in my room. How could she be so shameless? Ryuto got up to wash up, and couldn't help but secretly ridicule her in his heart. But seeing that the young miss paid a kiss as accommodation fee yesterday, Ryuto didn't plan to continue ridiculing her. Instead, he returned to the bamboo forest where he usually trained and continued his daily training. The bamboo forest where Ryuto trained was not far from his original room. He could almost see it when he opened the door. Because he had recently developed a habit of practicing martial arts, he always woke up an hour earlier than the usual school time and ran to the small bamboo forest to train diligently. But Colored Glaze definitely didn't have this habit. So the young girl slept until around 7:30 before waking up. When Colored Glaze opened her eyes, she also saw an unfamiliar ceiling. Where is this? Was I kidnapped again? She first rubbed her eyes, then got up from the unfamiliar bed and stretched her body slightly. At this time, Colored Glaze was wearing a comfortable silk nightgown, exposing her round shoulders and beautiful collarbones to the air. The air in the room was still filled with Ryuto's scent, which made Colored Glaze, who woke up, suddenly realize what she did yesterday. So embarrassing, I want to die. After waking up, the first thing Colored Glaze did was to pick up a pillow and cover her red face, then crazily rolled around on the bed. She had forcefully rushed into someone else's headquarters and demanded to be the big sister. She had also taken the initiative to kiss someone else's room. In the end, she had even kicked out the owner of the room and occupied it. Was this really something a normal person would do? At least for the Colored Glaze, who had always followed the rules since she was young. The things that happened last night didn't seem to be her doing. It was as if she had been possessed by something strange. It seems that I was in a state of excitement yesterday, and I didn't act rationally at all. But forget it. What's done is done. There's no point in thinking about it now. Immediately, Colored Glaze got up, washed up, and put on her clothes and socks. Last night, the dancing costume company had already put all the daily necessities the young miss needed in the room. They also took Ryuto's things out of the room and cleared them out, so the Colored Glaze's life was not affected. However, when Colored Glaze had just put on the Dory First High School uniform and opened the door, she looked straight ahead and saw a familiar figure in the bamboo forest. It was Ryuto. Early in the morning, Ryuto had been diligently cultivating in the bamboo forest. Cultivating would cause one to sweat, and it was sticky and uncomfortable. Moreover, there weren't any females around, so Ryuto usually took off his shirt when cultivating. With Ryuto's current extraordinary physique, after a certain degree of training, the inside and outside of his body had almost reached the same level. In other words, the clothes he was wearing now were nothing special. But once he took them off, he looked like a well-built statue with distinct features. The smooth lines of his muscles were tight and firm, but not overly bloated. Every part of his body was just right. It didn't give people the feeling that his muscles were made of sticks. Instead, it felt like every inch of his muscles and bones contained explosive power. When he stood, he looked very stable, as if his feet were rooted to the ground. When he moved, his steps were nimble, and his momentum was like a meteor catching up with the moon. Especially when he punched, he used his waist as his shoulder, and his shoulder as his arm. And when he punched, his entire arm made a crackling sound like a whip, as if the air in front of him was blown away. Oh ho ho ho, so powerful. When she saw the figure in the bamboo forest concentrating on cultivating, Colored Glaze couldn't help but widen her eyes. And then she looked up and down with an admiring gaze. On TV, it was common to see bodybuilders posing in all kinds of wonderful positions for people to watch. But Colored Glaze only felt that those scenes were greasy. Ryuto was different. His smooth body constantly made all kinds of nimble movements, and it only made people sigh at the great potential of the human body to be able to do such unimaginable activities. Therefore, Colored Glaze was unknowingly stunned until the dancing costume came over and waved her hand in front of her eyes. "Miss, you can go eat breakfast now. Do you still want to watch?" "Oh, After being shocked by the dancing costume, Colored Glaze almost jumped up from the ground, but she immediately hurriedly walked to the left. "Wait, miss, the restaurant is in the opposite direction." "I know, I'm just going to take a walk." As though she didn't want to admit that she was addicted to the physical temptation of that stinky pervert, Luli still had a dark expression on her face when she sat down to eat breakfast in the small dining room, as though she had been hit by a stick early in the morning. Before leaving, Colored Glaze still didn't have a good expression, and people who didn't know would think that Ryuto owed her a few $100 million, although it was hard to say what it was. But even so, Ryuto still shamelessly got into Colored Glaze's car and sat with the miss happily driving to Dory First High. Looking at the stinky pervert sitting next to her, Colored Glaze curled her lips. "Don't you have your own car at home? Do you have to sleep with me?" "No, I usually take the subway there." Ryuto was also a master of lying without blinking. He directly replied with a smile. "Young miss, he's talking nonsense. I've seen him being picked up by a car with my own eyes. Hey, the driver in front, drive properly. Don't look around. You have no professional ethics." I'm the young mistress chauffeur, not yours. Your missy is living in my house now, and you're also living in my house. It's not too much to ask you to be a chauffeur to pay the rent, right?" "Oh, how infuriating." In this relaxed and humorous atmosphere, the car that originally belonged to Colored Glaze arrived at the entrance of Dooley First High School. Oh, it's Miss Colored Glaze." When the students saw the familiar car, they couldn't help but look in the direction of the parking lot. After all, Colored Glaze was the untouchable flower of Dooley First High School. No matter where she went, she would attract a lot of attention, especially when they saw Miss Colored Glaze elegantly step out of the car when they arrived at school early in the morning. It really made them feel like it was another refreshing day. When the students who were secretly watching from not far away wanted to admire the beautiful scene of Miss Colored Glaze getting out of the car door opened, and a man stepped out. "Miss Colored Glaze, who the F***ck are you?" At that moment, many students couldn't help but want to curse. However, when they saw that the person who got out of the car was actually Ryuto Kiryu, they swallowed their curses back into their stomachs. "It's actually him. Then it's fine." When they saw that the person who got out of the car was actually that big bastard, almost all of the students with ashen faces quickly walked into the school gate. They didn't dare to look in that direction anymore. After the Dooley First Martial Arts Tournament not long ago, the name Ryuto Kiryu had completely become the nightmare of Dooley First High School. Many students hated and were afraid of him, but they didn't dare to say it out loud. They could only suppress it in their hearts. Many of them even became mentally ill, and only dared to say things like, "Tong say F***ck you up" in their dreams. This disease was later called Ryuto Kiryu syndrome. It even spread to the whole of Japan. But that's a story for later. In short, just like that, Ryuto and Colored Glaze got out of the car together openly and walked towards the school under the stunned gazes of many people. The two figures walking together were obviously very conspicuous, but because of Ryuto's fierce reputation, not many people dared to look in their direction. Of course, ordinary people didn't dare to look in their direction, but it didn't mean that some acquaintances didn't dare to. Isn't that Ryuto and Colored Glaze? Good morning." Before the two walked into the school, not far away, a tall senior hurried over after seeing them with a bright smile on her face. Early in the morning, being able to see Union's bright smile really made people feel happy. Unfortunately, if her smile hadn't been directed at Long Do, that little brat, the surrounding students would have definitely felt much happier. "Union, good morning." "Union, long time no see." When Union came to the two, Ryuto and Colored Glaze also greeted her. However, Union looked at the two people who came to school together and asked with a smile, You two just happened to meet on the road? Or, did you two agree to come together? It had to be said that with Yunyan's identity, this question was more or less sensitive. After all, she was Ryudo's official girlfriend, and Colored Glaze also knew this. Thus, Colored Glaze quickly replied, "Of course it's just a coincidence. It's neither. It's just that this guy's rebellious period has come to an end. He was arguing with his mother and ran away from home. He stayed at my house last night." Without waiting for Colored Glaze to finish, Ryudo said the truth with a smile. "What the hell is your head stuffed with? How can you say such things to your girlfriend?" Suddenly, Colored Glaze couldn't help but cover her face with her hands, but she slightly opened her fingers to see how Yunyan would fly into a rage early in the morning and scold Ryudo. However, to Colored Glaze's surprise, Yunyan didn't fly into a rage. Instead, she smiled in surprise and said, "Aya, that's great. I also want to run away from home recently. Do you mind if I move in with you?" It's over, this woman isn't normal either. After seeing Yunyan's reaction, Colored Glaze couldn't help but think. Chapter 202. Sakujiri Yunyan, this senior, had always been a very mysterious existence in Colored Glaze's heart. The reason why she used mysterious instead of wonderful to describe her was because her heart was complicated. It was because Yunyan's inner thoughts were complicated and profound. It was difficult to understand them, using normal theories and thinking methods. For example, when she heard that her boyfriend was living together with another girl, Yunyan's first reaction was, "That's great." It made Colored Glaze want to shout, "What the hell is this? Did you see that? This is Yunyan's magnanimity, it's different from yours." At this time, Ryudo looked at the stunned Colored Glaze with a provocative gaze. At the same time, he glanced at her magnanimity, that was very small compared to Yunyan's. "Bastard. What are you looking at? Who said I'm small? It's not obvious." Colored Glaze seemed to have received the message from Ryudo's gaze. After angrily glaring back, she looked at Yunyan's magnanimity, and the corner of her mouth twitched. What did this girl eat growing up? Is this really the level of a high school student? C? No, at least AD? What the hell is this? After secretly ridiculing Yunyan's magnanimity, Colored Glaze couldn't help but ask, "Yunyan, you're also planning to run away from home? Really?" If Colored Glaze wasn't mistaken, Yunyan's words did reveal that she wanted to run away from home. This was a bit strange. After all, Yunyan was the eldest daughter of the Tsukujiri group. Her father, Tsukujiri Kyoji, was a famous entrepreneur and inventor. Her mother, Makoto, was a famous singer. The husband and wife were harmonious, the family was happy, and they both doted on Yunyan. She shouldn't have any reason to run away from home. Don't mention it. Speaking of this, Yunyan was clearly confused. She smiled bitterly and said, "Recently, my mother joined some great beauty association. She kept saying that my father and my skin are too yellow, and that we need to do some special whitening. I really can't stand her." From Yunyan's tone, she clearly didn't understand her mother's strange thoughts. "We're all yellow-skinned people. Why do we have to go for special whitening and make ourselves so white? Isn't this against the natural order?" But the problem was that Makoto obviously didn't think so. The reason could be traced back to the strange Great Beauty Association organization. Great Beauty Association? I know. Is it the association that's especially popular in the political and business circles recently? Hearing this name, Colored Glaze thought for a while, then frowned. As the eldest daughter of the Kamiyoshi family, she naturally received a lot of news in the political and business world. Among them, the Great Beauty Association was obviously the one that had risen the fastest recently. In all of Tokyo, there were many social associations. Actually, even Ryudo's Rulon group could be considered a part of these associations. Some special associations often participated in various social, economic, and even political activities. Some could even interfere with national affairs behind the scenes. The Great Beauty Association was a typical example. Every association had a core, a basic axis. For example, the Rulon group's axis was loyalty and chivalry. According to what Colored Glaze knew, the Great Beauty Association was an association that promoted great American culture. Its core was naturally related to America. For example, all the members of the Great Beauty Association ate hamburgers, drank cola, and watched American movies together. They dyed their hair blonde and had to whiten their skin. The official language of the association was American English, and the emblem was the Statue of Liberty. From Colored Glaze's perspective, this association was truly absurd. This was because they pursued a Yamato when you enter, a beautiful person when you leave. They whitewashed people from the inside out, and from the outside in again. They whitewashed people in various ways. It could be said that it was almost to the point of morbidity. Such an almost morbid association should logically be a party for a small group of enthusiasts. But that wasn't the case. Before many people could react, the Great Beauty Association had already developed to the point where it had tens of thousands of members. There were also some famous people in the political and business world. For example, Union's mother Makoto was one of them. At this thought, Colored Glaze and the other two had already walked through the school gate. They were about to head to different school buildings. Union, are you free this afternoon? How about we have lunch together? Thus, Colored Glaze invited Union to lunch. It was obvious that she had something to discuss with her. Me? Really? Of course. Previously, Ryuto and Colored Glaze didn't invite Union to their lunch gatherings. This time, they specially invited her, which made this senior very happy. She even skipped away. However, when Ryuto saw Colored Glaze's expression, he asked in confusion, "Is there a problem with the Great Beauty Association? Your expression seems to have changed." "Of course there's a problem. It's a big problem related to you." Colored Glaze glanced at Ryuto. She felt like she was looking at an idiot who didn't know he was being schemed against. "It's related to me? When did I offend the people from the Great Beauty Association?" The president of the Great Beauty Association is Father John. Although he makes himself look like a foreigner, he's actually Japanese. You should be familiar with his original name, Kawada Hideo. Kawada Hideo. Kawada. Ah, that bastard queen's brother? In an instant, Ryuto immediately remembered the names he saw when he was investigating Kawadaya. As the queen, Kawadaya had a brother named Kawada Hideo, who was the young master who stole the test papers that Ryuto beat up. He was Kawada Makaki's father. After the Runxiao Alliance incident not long ago, Ryuto knew that he already had a deep grudge with the queen. He didn't expect to be connected to her family in this seemingly unrelated place. Great Beauty Association. This association, whether it was the name or the content, was led by America. If one thought about it carefully, their goal should be to destroy the native culture and the confidence of the people. They were definitely an organization that harbored evil intentions. Anyone with a brain could see that. According to Rue Hui, Kawadaya and America were inextricably linked. They might even be a pawn sent by the other side. Kawada Hideo changed his name to Father John and did this weird cultural invasion. After all, he was a traitor. He wouldn't tremble in fear if he did something like this. However, how the siblings rebelled was none of Ryuto's business. Whether or not the culture of this stupid country was invaded had nothing to do with him. What made him feel troubled was the grudge between him and the siblings. As the elder sister, the plan that she came up with was completely destroyed by Ryuto. As the younger brother, the son that he raised single-handedly was beaten up by Longdo. Longdo wouldn't believe that the other side wouldn't take revenge on him, even if he was beaten to death. So now, Ryuto didn't just have to be wary of Kawadaya's open and covert attacks. Even the Great Beauty Association would become his enemy. Unfortunately, Union's mother was a member of the Great Beauty Association. This was giving him a headache. If one day Ryuto had a conflict with the Great Beauty Association, and Union's mother happened to be inside, the situation would be too scary. Colored Glaze had obviously expected this. That was why she asked Union to come over for lunch. She wanted to talk about Union's mother, Jinshin. No matter what, she had to get Jinshin to leave the association. Otherwise, Ryuto would be in the way when he did many things in the future. After the association found out about the relationship between Yunyan and Ryudo, they might even take advantage of it and cause an irreparable gap between Ryudo and Yunyan, or Yunyan and Jinshin. If that was the case, who could stand it? His future mother-in-law going against him, that would be too humiliating. So during this morning's class, Ryudo didn't do anything. He just flipped through the information about the Great Beauty Association that Sensible found for him. However, from the information that could be found on the internet, this association didn't do anything out of line. They just organized for members to study American culture. There was nothing wrong with it. The most ridiculous thing was that their members didn't even have to pay a membership fee when they joined. After joining, they would be given free uniforms and free meals. From time to time, they would even organize trips to American. It was so friendly that it made people click their tongue. Of course, the qualifications to join such a friendly association were naturally not available to just anyone. The lowest-ranking members were those low-ranking managers, and most of them were even the family members or partners of many business owners. Incredible! What a huge organization! After carefully reading through Sensible's information, although Ryudo didn't find any evidence of this Great Beauty Association doing anything bad, he had a more direct understanding of their organization's scale. One word to describe it was awesome. 2 words to describe it was awesome. 2 words to describe it was very awesome. 2 words to describe it was one hand covering the sky. Through the member list that Sensible obtained through some special means, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that the Great Beauty Association was close to covering the sky with one hand in Tokyo. After all, the members ranged from the cabinet to the Metropolitan Police Department, from the Self-Defense Forces to the Chamber of Commerce. They were almost everywhere and had infiltrated the entire capital. For such a laughable organization to be able to achieve this in such a short period of time, it was impossible to say that there wasn't a huge force behind it, and that Empress Kawada, as well as the American organization behind her, was the main culprit. Chapter 203. That afternoon, in the corner of the garden that was emitting a fresh aroma, Colored Glaze and Ryudo accompanied Yunyan to eat while telling her what they had found out. No, it can't be right. That association is a place like that. After knowing what kind of strange place her mother had entered, Yunyan couldn't help but cover her mouth and reveal an expression of disbelief. Although she didn't agree with her mother following the Great Beauty Association and making herself like an American, she didn't think that there was such a complicated situation behind it. Although senior sister Yunyan was relatively naive and didn't participate in these strange matters, she could tell that this bullshit association definitely didn't have good intentions. If her mother, Jinshin, stayed there for too long, something would happen sooner or later. In a moment of desperation, Yunyan picked up her phone and shouted, "No! I'll call my mother to withdraw from the association right now." But before Yunyan could dial that familiar number, Ryudo gently pressed down on her hand. "Ryudo? If you call your mother now and tell her about this, do you think she'll believe you?" After hearing Ryudo's words, Yunyan was first stunned, then she sighed deeply. Indeed, as Ryudo said, Jinshin wouldn't pay attention to such guesses and deductions without evidence even if she told her. There was even the risk of alerting the enemy. After all, up until now, the Great Beauty Association hadn't done anything bad. They just took in members normally and promoted American culture normally. They didn't have any responsibilities. Thinking of this, Yunyan couldn't help but sigh. Is there really nothing we can do? Do we have to wait until something happens to them before we can do anything to them? That's the case for now. But Yunyan, I want to know what your father's attitude is about this. This is very important. Father, he doesn't really understand mother's passion for the Great Beauty Association. But father has always respected mother, so he won't interfere. Then, can your mother interfere with some of your father's decisions? As a member of Dark Crow, he has a lot of say in many things. Colored Glaze asked without hesitation, even though Yunyan mentioned some very special terms, as if she believed that Yunyan naturally knew what Dark Crow was. However, Yunyan scratched her head. I'm sorry, what's a dark crow? I've never heard of this term before. Yunyan then looked at Ryudo. Ryudo also shook his head, indicating that he didn't know what a dark crow was. Hearing this, Luli slapped her forehead and asked in disbelief. It can't be? Both of you. Alright, let's start with Yatsuki. Yatsuki. What's that? Yatsuki is a secret society, and it is the oldest secret society in the history of this country. It is also the core that truly controls this country. What? Hearing this, Ryudo and Yunyan couldn't help but widen their eyes. After all, this was simply too sensational. A secret society was actually the core that controls the entire country? Of course, looking at the world, it wasn't that there weren't similar secret societies. The more well-known one was the legendary Freemasonry. Freemasonry was the main force behind the government and political parties of Western countries. It was called the shadow government. It was said that there were many famous people among the members of the Freemasonry, such as presidents of America, governors, justices, world-class rich, etc. The power of this society was said to be enough to affect every corner of the world. In the distant island country of the East, a similar huge society was the Yatsuki that Colored Glaze mentioned. This secret society was said to have started in 660 BC, when the first emperor, Kidney Marshal Emperor, ascended the throne. Yatsuki was originally a small group formed by many nobles. Later, they gradually recruited members to expand their sphere of influence. Until modern times, it even became a real shadow government that truly controlled the island country. The structure of Yatsuki is divided into 3 levels. The highest level is Golden Duck, which has been fixed for generations by the leaders of religious, political, and military circles. But after World War II, Japan was not allowed to have an army, so it was changed to the leaders of the business world. Speaking of this, Luli casually picked up a pen and carefully wrote on the tablecloth that was spread out on the table. The second level is known as the Dark Crows. There are 12 members in this level, and they will be selected from the current political elites, noble families, and business giants. Senior sister Yunyan's father, Gong Si, and my mother, Rue Hui, are all members of the Dark Crows. Mrs. Rue Hui is also a member of Yatsuki. This kind of thing wasn't mentioned in the game. After hearing that name, Ryudo couldn't help but gasp, because this was something he didn't expect. After all, in Red Album 2, No Survivors, as a player, the protagonist could only see the side of the game. There were many things hidden under the surface that he didn't know. However, in the second half of the game, after IM led her Tenmu group to openly rebel, it was said that hundreds of missiles blew up a lot of high and mighty old men. Now that he thought about it, it was probably referring to the people of Yatsuki. While Longdo was pondering, Luli finally wrote, "The third level structure is Last Feather. The number of people has changed from about 1,000 at the peak to more than 600 now. Basically, they are all well-known big politicians, big bosses, or famous scholars, scientists, artists, lawyers, and so on." After finishing, Colored Glaze's tablecloth was already filled with words. She had also drawn a pyramid structure with 3 levels, which symbolized the power of Yatsuki. I see. As expected of the legendary secret society, it's quite exaggerated. After listening to Colored Glaze's explanation and her writing, Ryudo couldn't help but sigh. Golden Duck, Dark Crow, Last Feather. These 3 levels of Yatsuki basically included the upper echelons of Japan's elite forces. Although there were only 600 or 700 people, their influence was stronger than the remaining 100 million people. Colored Glaze used the phrase, "This society controls the core of the country," to describe it. And it wasn't wrong at all. Thinking about it, Kaneshiro Rui and Sakujiri Kyoji were basically at the level of a tyrant. But in Yatsuki, they were only members of the Dark Crow, in the middle level of Yatsuki. In other words, there were 10 other members of Yatsuki who were on the same level as them. Even without looking at the 3 Golden Duck at the top and the hundreds of Last Feather at the bottom, just the 12 members of the Dark Crow at the middle level were already terrifying enough. At this moment, Ryudo finally understood what kind of organization he was fighting against, and what kind of organization Tenmu Ayam was fighting against. From a certain perspective, Ryudo and Ayam actually had the same enemy, Yatsuki. After all, if Ryudo wanted to destroy the vegetarian king system, it would be useless to convince the Kamiyoshi. His enemy wasn't the Kamiyoshi, but the Yatsuki behind them. Especially in the Golden Duck, at the top level, there were two big shots in the religious and political world, the Shinto Lord and the Inner Cabinet Prime Minister. The vegetarian king system passed down by the Kamiyoshi was, in essence, to serve the Shinto Lord and the Inner Cabinet. It was a method passed down from ancient times to strengthen the lower level of management. In the name of God, they ruled the lower level, and humans took over the position of God. Therefore, the existence of the Kamiyoshi was a sign that the upper level gave their own people the right to take over the position of God. It was a sign that made everyone obey. Therefore, it was almost impossible to abolish the vegetarian king system, and that would be destroying the Golden Duck reputation. As long as the Golden Duck still existed, they could even eliminate the current Kamiyoshi and replace them with other people who were willing to carry out the vegetarian king system. In any case, it was fine as long as they were called Kamiyoshi. It didn't matter whether they were the same people or not. So far, it was the first time that Ryudo said these things, but Rue Hui was obviously clear about it. Ryudo didn't quite understand why Rue Hui didn't pursue to break away from the shackles of the family with her strength, and why she was willing to be locked in the heavenly temple for 20 years. Now he understood that it wasn't that Rue Hui didn't want to resist, but that Rue Hui knew the existence of the Yatsuki, and knew that she was powerless to resist this huge organization. No matter how smart Rue Hui was, no matter how scheming she was, the big difference between her and Ayam was that Rue Hui didn't have Ayam's arrogance and boldness that could subvert the world. In the original work, Ayam basically gave people the feeling that she was crazy in the end. She directly threw missiles to the group of Tokyo dignitaries to take a bath. She didn't care what their F***king identity was. All living things were equal under the missiles. From this point of view, the Yatsuki wasn't invincible. Ayam successfully killed them, proving that as long as she found the right opportunity, there was a possibility of winning. But the most troublesome thing for Ryudo was that he had to deal with the Heavenly Eye group, while dealing with the Yatsuki. After all, when Ayam randomly threw missiles in a period of time, she wouldn't deliberately avoid Ryudo and the Rulon group. She would blow up everything that needed to be blown up. However, these things didn't have much to do with Ryudo for the time being. At present, he still had to focus on the Empress siblings and the Great Beauty Association. If the matter of Union's mother wasn't resolved, they would always feel that they had a big weakness in the hands of the enemy. It would inevitably make them feel like they were sitting on pins and needles. Chapter 204. If that's the case, we should investigate this Great Beauty Association first. At the same time, we should start with Union's mother. As the saying went, the one who started the trouble needed to untie it. Colored Glaze naturally understood this principle very well. Currently, the rope around Ryudo and the others' heads was Union's mother, Zhenqin. If they wanted to unravel this trap, they had to investigate what the Great Beauty Association was up to. They also had to start with Zhenqin. If he didn't figure out why Zhenqin joined the Great Beauty Association, and why she trusted those people so much, it would be very difficult to pull her out of there. At this time, they especially couldn't use violence. Otherwise, it would only make the victim fall deeper and deeper, making Zhenqin even more determined to join the Great Beauty Association. Instantly, Ryudo rubbed his chin. Investigating the association can be left to Sensible and Gao Yuan. As for Union's mother, let's go see for ourselves after school. See for ourselves after school? You want to come to my house as guests? That's great, you're very welcome. Hearing this, Union's face lit up, as if she was very happy with this suggestion. After all, although Union was the school's idol, she didn't have that many close friends. There were even fewer friends who could come to her house to play. Very good, then it's decided. Wait for us at the parking lot after school. We'll go to Union's house together and have a chat with Auntie. Ooh. Ooh. With Colored Glaze's arrangement and Ryuto and Union's cooperation, this lunch meeting that wasn't easy finally came to an end. That afternoon's class was long and boring for Union. Perhaps it was because her mind was already focused on the special home visit after school, and she kept secretly hoping that time would pass faster. Hee. Even in class, Yin would occasionally let out a light chuckle, which gave the students of grade 3 class a fright. What's going on? Did Yin encounter something good today? Of course, Yin did encounter a good thing. It could even be said that it was a very good thing. However, my boyfriend will bring his future wife to my house to find my mother. Even if she only said it out loud, it would be too scary. Naturally, Yin wouldn't be stupid enough to tell anyone. At most, she would add this kind of plot into her own novel to make that future masterpiece more realistic and realistic. T. But no matter what, after school in the afternoon, the two cars belonging to the Tsukimori group and the Kamiyoshi clan respectively drove in the same direction. Perhaps because she was too excited, Yin didn't even sit in her own car. Instead, she squeezed into the car driven by Dancing Costume. She squeezed in with Ryuto and Colored Glaze. On the way, in the back seat of the car, Ryuto was enjoying the treatment of an emperor, because on both sides of him sat two beautiful girls, each with their own unique characteristics. The back seat of Colored Glaze's car was not that wide. When the three of them sat in a row, their body parts would naturally have some contact. This naturally made Ryuto very satisfied. Great. This feeling was really great. Now, Ryuto was sandwiched by the shoulders and legs of the two beautiful girls, forming a state of two pieces of bread sandwiched between cheese. The soft touch and sweet smell was simply irresistible. After seeing the silly smile on Ryuto's face, Union couldn't help but ask, "Ryuto, why are you smiling like this? Are you looking forward to coming to my house that much?" But before Ryuto could answer, Colored Glaze on the other side frowned in annoyance. "I advise you not to delve too deeply into the answer." Why? Because this guy is an old pervert. His mind is only filled with strange things. After last night's spit-tongue gate incident, Colored Glaze now had a great prejudice against Ryuto. She had already fixed his image in the realm of wretched old pervert. Strange things. Is it that the age thing? Pfft. When Union said that word openly, Colored Glaze couldn't help but turn around and spit on the car window next to her face. What's wrong with this woman's brain? Why isn't she embarrassed at all? Colored Glaze quickly took out a handkerchief to wipe her mouth and the car window. She smiled bitterly. Union, you dare to say this in front of Ryuto? At this point, Colored Glaze glared at Ryuto, who was smiling foolishly, as if warning him not to laugh out loud. But as long as it develops into a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship, then isn't it normal to have intimate physical contact? This is human nature, and also an expression of love. This. Facing Union's serious explanation, Colored Glaze didn't know how to answer for a moment. Union's words were indeed reasonable. Humans were born with certain desires, and humans also relied on this desire to reproduce. This was a feeling that everyone had, and there was really nothing to be ashamed of. Especially after falling in love, it was normal for men and women to have physical contact with each other. After all, this was also a kind of expression of love. So when he heard these very reasonable words, Ryuto finally couldn't help but laugh out loud. "What are you laughing at?" "Sorry, I thought of something happy." "What's the happy thing?" "Just now, someone couldn't help but spit on the car window." Pa. In the next second, Colored Glaze suddenly pinched Ryuto's leg, but because his skin was too hard, and Colored Glaze's strength was too weak, she almost didn't feel anything. Then she said sternly, "Don't think that just because Union said so, you can touch us as you wish. Also don't laugh." "I didn't." "Alright, I don't know who forced their head yesterday." Pfft. "Hey. Let's get back to the topic. That you just said touch us. To what extent are you referring?" "It's not a question of what extent. It's just that you can't touch us when we don't let you touch us. Only when we let you touch us can you. Yunyan, can I touch your hand? Sure. Before she finished speaking, Ryudo held Yunyan's hand and shook it in front of Colored Glaze. Yunyan and Ryudo have been together for a while, so it was very natural for them to shake hands, although they didn't have time to do more intimate actions. Seeing Yunyan's cooperative action, Colored Glaze unconsciously took a deep breath to avoid being angered to death by this bastard couple. What did you say just now? I can't touch you when you don't let me touch you. Is that right? Puffed. You're too much. I've tolerated you for a long time. You still have the nerve to laugh. I really did get permission to touch you just now, and I didn't laugh. You were clearly laughing. You didn't even stop. Miss Colored Glaze, I have the quality and dignity of a team leader. So no matter how funny things are, I won't laugh, unless I can't help it. You. Just when Colored Glaze was about to bite him in anger, the car finally successfully arrived at the destination and temporarily stopped the flirting in the car. Just like Colored Glaze, who got a Kamishiro villa for her family in the port area to make it convenient for her to go to school, the Tsutsumira that Ryudo went to was actually not Yunyan's home. Her parents were also afraid that it would be troublesome for their daughter to go to school, so they deliberately got a house near the school. And Yunyan's home, Tsutsumi Villa, was located in Tokyo's Setagaya, about 20 kilometers away from the city center. Setagaya was the most representative residential area of the rich in Tokyo. Almost all the houses in the area were independent, without the oppressive feeling of modern high-rise buildings. The design was more comfortable, and it was called the world's top mansion. It was understood that most of the people who lived in this area were famous entrepreneurs, big-name stars, and cultural celebrities. After all, the houses were particularly expensive, so as long as they lived in this area, they would be associated with the rich. But even if this was the area of the rich, the big house where the chairman of Tsutsumi Group lived was very special and very eye-catching. The mountain path in the suburbs closest to the north of Setagaya was full of all kinds of flowers and green quilts. Because this area was a little far from the city center, there were very few cars and pedestrians around. At this time, Ryudo's car had even reached a higher position halfway up the mountain. When Ryudo got out of the car and looked into the distance, he couldn't help but feel a little shocked, even though he had experienced a lot of wind and rain. Because there, a huge luxurious Western-style building that seemed to be the residence of a royal family was quietly standing there. The size of the building made it difficult to associate the word home with the word. It looked like some kind of hotel or resort. Indeed, after all, the facade of this Tsutsumi Villa building was paved with various natural stones. It looked layered, and it covered an area of more than 2,000 square meters. There were more than 20 bedrooms, 12 parking spaces, a huge endless swimming pool, a tennis court, a private theater, and other facilities. Walking together with Yunyan through the porch built with fragrant wood, Ryudo almost had an old man, subway, mobile phone expression the whole time. Although he already knew that Yunyan's family was very rich, he also saw this Tsutsumi Villa that was said to be worth billions in the original game. But only when he really came here, he could understand what was called the bastard luxurious enjoyment of the rich. It simply made Ryudo have a feeling of envy. Chapter 205. However, no matter how luxurious the villa was, Yunyan didn't have any special feelings about it. After all, this was her home. She had grown up here. It would be strange if she had any special feelings about it. Young mistress, you're back. Are these two your friends? After Ryudo and Colored Glaze followed Yunyan into the lush green courtyard that presented nature and modern luxury, an elegant old butler came over and bowed to the three of them. Unlike the butler in Kamiyoshi, the butler in the Tsukumi family didn't have a cold and aloof temperament. Instead, he made people feel comfortable like they were bathing in the spring breeze. Yes, mother is home, right? I'd like to introduce a friend to her. She was, but young Mistress Jinshin received a call a few minutes ago and left in a hurry. She said she was going to a gathering with friends, She should be back around 7 or 8 at the earliest. Call. Gathering? Friends. When she heard these words, Yunyan couldn't help but recall the gatherings that the Great Beauty Association often held. Her expression instantly turned sour. However, the more troublesome thing was that Jinqin wasn't home. Wouldn't that mean that Ryudo and Colored Glaze had made a wasted trip? It was only 4 in the afternoon. Originally, Ryudo and Jinqin didn't plan to stay here for too long. They planned to chat with Jinqin and find out more about her, pretending to be interested in the Great Beauty Association, and get ready to go home. However, Jinqin would only be back around 7 or 8 at the earliest. If they chatted with her again, they didn't know how long it would take. Therefore, Yunyan turned around and said awkwardly, "I'm sorry. Why don't you have dinner here tonight, or just stay here? How about that?" When they were in the car earlier, Yunyan had mentioned that because her father was on a business trip, apart from the dozen servants and 20-odd bodyguards, only Yunyan and Jinqin lived in the Tsukumi villa. It was quite lonely. Therefore, when she heard that Colored Glaze and Ryudo were living together, she thought of running away from home to find them. However, the effect of letting them stay in her home seemed to be the same. "Are we going to stay here? It doesn't seem to be a problem. Anyway, I'm now a runaway, so I can live wherever I want. Not to mention this guy, he's been raised casually." Colored Glaze pursed her lips and glanced at Ryudo, as if she had no intention of asking for his opinion. Of course, how could Ryudo have any objections to this proposal? After all, Yuejian Villa was such a luxurious villa, and it was Yunyan's home. What a joke, to be able to live in the home of a cute girlfriend. That was something that many people dreamed of. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had to have a cute girlfriend, woo-woo. Just like that, the three of them entered the first floor of the entire villa, under the guidance of the butler. A large floating ring was used as decoration outside the door, which not only echoed the style of the space, but also added a sense of ceremony to the entrance, reflecting the high-tech attribute of the Tsukujiri group. After he led Ryudo and the others to the living room, he couldn't help but sigh when he saw the 4 to 5 meter high ceiling and 1 to 200 square meters of living room. The design of the living room was simple but not lacking in quality. It used white marble, transparent glass, and a black chandelier like an art installation, which added a luxurious atmosphere to the space. However, no matter how luxurious the living room was, it was still just a living room, and it still couldn't help them pass the time. Right now, it was only 4 o'clock, and there were still more than 2 hours before dinner, so they had to find something to do. "Yunyan, do you have any entertainment in your house? It's good to pass the time." There's a home theater, spa, gym, study, bar, tennis court." Okay. You're telling me the names of the dishes. Then, other than reading and writing novels, what do you like to do the most? "Usually alright. How about we go to the swimming pool? My swimming pool is really fun." "Swimming pool? Is it the endless swimming pool I saw just now? It seems to be pretty good." The endless swimming pool was a swimming pool with no borders as its design effect. Through the special design of the pool's edge, it made the swimming pool look like it had no edges and pool walls, as if it could extend to a very far place. The endless swimming pool of Tsukuminari Kazuna was very special. Its size almost surrounded the building area, which meant that the horizontal swimming pool area was as exaggerated as thousands of square meters. You could even play electric hoverboards in it. And according to Yunyan's introduction, there was a water directional laminar flow system in the pool. The pool water could be set to flow with or against the current, so that the effect of swimming forward, without having to change directions, was similar to the principle of a treadmill. Although Ryudo didn't particularly like swimming, he was still quite interested in such a special swimming pool. The most important thing was that he could also see Yunyan and Colored Glaze's swimsuits. Before the arrival of summer, and before everyone had plans to go to the seaside, it was very difficult to see the swimsuits of these two beauties. However, at this time, senior sister Yunyan took the initiative to suggest this. Only a fool would refuse. However, Colored Glaze refused without hesitation. It wasn't because she was a fool, but because this unlucky woman was afraid of water. When she heard that they were going to the swimming pool, And such a big swimming pool. Colored Glaze shook her head like a rattle drum. No, I'm afraid of water the most. I have a psychological shadow of water since I was a child. Psychological shadow? When did you fall into the water? Something like that. It's just that when I was young, my mother was in the mood to personally help me bathe. Then the bathtub at home was too deep. She slipped and threw me into it, and drank to her heart's content. When she thought of the tragedy, Colored Glaze couldn't help but roll her eyes. And when Ryudo thought of Mrs. Ruehue holding the little Colored Glaze to take a bath, but slipped and threw the baby in the bathtub, he couldn't help but laugh. Puffed. You laughed again, bastard. I'm not talking to you anymore. Umph. After this, Colored Glaze couldn't help but leave angrily. She ran to the study not far away to read some books to pass the time, leaving Ryudo and Union here. Union looked at the direction where Colored Glaze ran and asked with a smile. She ran away, then we. Go change now. Okay. I didn't expect Ryudo to like swimming so much, although I like it too. Union showed a gentle smile when she heard this, as if she didn't care whether Ryudo liked swimming or other things. In this way, the two went to the changing room to change their swimsuits and prepared to swim in the huge swimming pool. As a boy, Ryudo changed his clothes very quickly. After entering the changing room, he directly took off his shirt and changed his pants into swimming trunks. He was ready to go at any time. After changing into his swimsuit, Long Do went to the endless swimming pool outside the courtyard alone and looked at the endless city scenery in front of him. Originally, the rich area in the Setagaya district was almost all bungalows and villas, and it was difficult to find high-rise buildings. In addition, the Tsukiminari Villa was built in the mountainside area with the highest terrain, so there was almost no obstruction at a glance. He could see the blue sky and the distant edge of the city. White lounge chairs were set on the edge of the pool, allowing people to lie there and rest at any time. If combined with the warm sun and a glass of iced cola, it was simply the best place to enjoy leisure time. However, just as Long Do got into the pool and soaked in the clean and clear water, a beautiful figure walked over to his side in a natural manner. Tap, tap, tap. After hearing the footsteps of the flip-flops at the edge of the pool, Ryudo knew that Union was here. Thus, he hurriedly turned his head and greeted, Union Shuejiyu, Originally, Ryudo planned to greet his girlfriend, but the moment he saw the figure at this time, his eyes widened as if he had never seen such a beautiful scenery. The vast mountainside scenery and the city skyline just now were nothing in front of Union's graceful figure at this time. Because she needed to swim, Union naturally wore a swimsuit. Moreover, she was not wearing an ordinary one-piece swimsuit, but a more daring bikini that completely emphasized the graceful curves of women. This was a classic light white bikini with a seashell edge. The slender belt went around the back and was tied around the swan-like slender neck. The waist of the swimsuit was tied with a unique white bow, allowing people to naturally notice the soft lines around the bow. At this time, Union's brown wavy hair was tied into a high ponytail, which looked very young and energetic. However, her slender and fair legs, and the two lumps of slime that were squeezed together at certain parts of her body, had nothing to do with the word youth. Instead, it made one think of her as being charming and something else. Sorry to keep you waiting. It seemed that she was very satisfied with Ryudo's attitude when he saw her swimsuit. Union had a victorious smile on her face. In fact, when she swam at home, Union wore a very conservative one-piece swimsuit. The reason why she deliberately changed into a bikini this time was that Union wanted to show her boyfriend her most beautiful side. A woman's body is a powerful weapon for men. This was a theory that Union had read many times from some books, and it was believed that there was no problem most of the time, especially after knowing that her boyfriend had other fiancés and future wives. Union wanted to show her best side, even more to make Ryudo like her more. Speaking of which, Union actually didn't object to Ryudo being with Colored Glaze and Dunya. After all, they had already reported in advance. But even so, there was a sense of competition between girls, and they hoped to be the number one in their lover's heart. And Yunyan's biggest advantage compared to the classic beauty of colored glaze and the cute contrasting dunya was her figure. In this regard, the two were simply not on the same level as her. They directly jumped from A, B to D, and there was still a C in between. He had to admit that this kind of competitive awareness was quite good. As long as it didn't develop into a palace fight, Ryudo didn't mind the three and his family competing with each other. In this way, he might have the opportunity to see something more exciting than Yunyan's bikini. Slurp. Chapter 206. Just as Ryudo was indulging in the bikini and body that made people want to have a nosebleed, Yunyan had already jumped into the water. Splash! A large splash of water splashed on Ryudo, and he was knocked back from the nosebleed fantasy. Ha ha ha, who told you to be in a daze? Seeing Ryudo being splashed, Yunyan couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. You dare to splash me? Don't run. Come here. Come and chase me if you have the ability. Let's see who swims faster. Maybe it was because he hadn't swam for a long time. Or maybe it was because his interest was aroused by Yunyan's swimsuit. Ryudo chased Yunyan around the pool, and the two played with each other from time to time. After playing for a while, the two leaned on the edge of the pool, looking at the vast horizon in the distance, and chatting with interest. Seeing that it was almost 6 o'clock, Longdo suddenly remembered and asked, Speaking of which, when your mother comes back later, will she find me an eyesore? Well, she should have heard of my name, right? It's not that Ryudo boasted, but there should be very few people in Yodo who don't know his name. After all, this is the #1 stinky rogue in the world. Puff. Yunyan smiled when she heard the words. You didn't realize that your reputation is bad until now, right? But you can rest assured that I usually mention you in front of my father and mother. You. How did you introduce me? I just said that you are a good person, and you have good accomplishments in literature. It's nice to be friends with you. What was your parents' reaction? They didn't call the police on the spot, right? They didn't call the police. They just repeatedly reminded me not to get too close to male classmates. But I didn't seem to care about this sentence. Speaking up to this point, senior sister Yunyan looked at the arm she was hugging and revealed a mischievous smile. Because the two were chatting together, Yunyan also hugged her boyfriend's arm in the water, like a pair of lovers with a good relationship. However, this action made Ryudo a little exciting. The smooth jade-like skin was especially moist due to the flowing water in the swimming pool. It stuck to Ryudo's arm. Half of the slime also quietly stuck to his arm, and even changed its shape. This was the first time in Ryudo's life that he had experienced this kind of smooth and soft feeling. It was many times more exciting than when he hugged the colored glaze last night. Colored glaze in the study at Chu. Although Ryudo had lost his first kiss, he was still an innocent young man. How could he resist such temptation? Thus, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva, and his face turned slightly red. After noticing the young man's embarrassment, Yunyan was not shy. Instead, she quietly stuck her head close to Ryudo's ear and asked, What's wrong? Are you shy? Hee hee. The girl's gentle voice gently echoed in his ear. That kind of exciting feeling made Ryudo unable to stop. He could only take a deep breath, turned his head and whispered to Yunyan, If this isn't your home, you'll know what it means to invite trouble. Originally, Ryudo only wanted to scare Yunyan, who would have thought that she would laugh and say, Aya, so what if it's my home? Isn't that more exciting? Okay, I forgot that she's such a woman. Seeing that pretty face that was sparkling with little stars because of excitement, Ryudo finally pulled her into his arms and kissed those rosy red lips. Compared to the unexpected kiss with the colored glaze last night, this time, Ryudo and Yunyan were obviously more active. Or it could be said that he was seduced more actively. After being kissed, Yunyan first moaned emotionally. Then, she reached out and hugged her boyfriend's neck, and responded enthusiastically. As the two hugged each other, the cool pool began to fill with a blazing aura. Even the flowing water was stained with a wonderful color and smell, making people feel a little shy. From the beginning, Ryudo had somewhat forgotten that Yunyan was actually a very bold woman. Moreover, she was originally a very active woman. She was also the only carnivorous female lead in Red Album 2. No survivors. Once a carnivorous woman saw someone she liked, she would take the initiative to express her love like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. She wouldn't be hesitant and would do what she should do. This type was very focused on carnal desires and enjoyment. Because their personality was similar to carnivorous animals, they were called carnivorous, corresponding to herbivorous. But when most people saw Yunyan, they probably couldn't imagine that she actually had such an active and passionate personality. After all, in terms of appearance, Yunyan belonged to the kind of gentle and virtuous appearance, which should make people think of a more conservative, more traditional woman. But in reality that wasn't the case. In the original plot line, Yunyan was the only female lead who dared to rebel against her family, against her parents, and even against the world. Because she didn't want to follow the future career that her parents had decided for her, she pulled the main character away from home and ran across Japan to avoid capture. This courage was stronger than colored glaze and dunya. Therefore, Yunyan was originally very bold, very bold. In the early days, when she was just a high school student, she already had courage level 3. After graduation next year, she would directly rise to courage level 4. Her courage was super fat. In this way, the two of them were intimate in the pool for a long time before slowly separating. After separating, Ryudo felt like he was floating in the air. After all, when he did the action that colored glaze didn't allow him to do with Yunyan yesterday, she didn't seem to be unhappy. Instead, she was even more enthusiastic than him. Yunyan reached out and touched her slightly red lips, excitedly smiled and said, "Hee hee, in this case we can be considered to have crossed the A stage." A stage? What do you mean? Hey, don't you know? It's the ABC of love. It's the 3 stages that lovers will go through. 3 stages. A is kissing, then the other 2 stages are, of course it's caressing and sleeping together. But these 2 stages still have to be left for the future. It's still a bit early for now. When the 2 of them climbed into the pool, Yunyan didn't hesitate to say these embarrassing words. From her tone, this Missy was even looking forward to B and C. You really dare to say that? If colored glaze heard this, she would spit out again. Spit it out. But she has to go through this process sooner or later. This is love. Although I came first, hee hee. After hearing Yunyan's proud laughter, Ryudo was too embarrassed to tell her that he had already crossed the A stage with colored glaze last night, so he could only rub his head and act dumb. After the 2 of them finished swimming and being intimate, the sky had gradually darkened. It was almost time for dinner. Before dinner, Yunyan asked Ryudo what he wanted to eat for dinner. I have 2 chefs at home now. One is a French chef, the other is a Spanish chef. There are actually 2 chefs from different countries. There were originally 3, but in the end, the chef who made Chinese cuisine was brought to England by my father. Every time he goes to England, he has to bring a chef, or else he will die from eating fish and chips every day. Damn it! What kind of Versailles tycoon is this? After secretly complaining in his heart, Ryudo still chose the French chef to make dinner. After all, there were 2 ladies. It was better to be as romantic and flirtatious as possible. The main dining room of Tsukuminari Kojo was very magnificent. The rectangular table, that was enough for dozens of people to sit side by side, had the aristocratic style of Hogwarts School of Magic. The 3 crystal chandeliers above the head, and the famous paintings on the surrounding walls, showed a noble atmosphere, while not being too ostentatious. Of course, at this moment, there were only 3 figures sitting at the front of the long dining table. They were the eldest Miss Yunyan and her 2 friends. The surrounding servants who were responsible for serving them were serving the dishes one by one on the table in order. The first dish was caviar with avocado and prawns. The wine should have been naturally sparkling Binoco grape wine, but because the 3 of them are not yet old enough to drink, the wine was paired with Binoco grape juice. Oh, delicious! When Ryudo scooped up a spoonful of food with a special mother-of-pearl spoon and bit into it, the strong freshness suddenly burst out. Under the caviar and avocado, There were also crushed apples and prawns. With one bite, in addition to the strong freshness in the mouth, there was also a faint fruity aroma in the mouth and nose, making one feel as if they were attacked by the sea and the orchard. After Ryudo finished the first dish in a few bites, the warm and fragrant black truffle crispy skin soup was served, followed by the classic French dish braised veal with white sauce, and the fresh and smooth almond goat's milk cheese were served one after another. How should he describe this feeling? It was as if an authentic French restaurant had been moved into his home. Whether it was the chef or the ingredients, they were all first class. F***ck the capitalists. The meal lasted for more than half an hour. When Long Do finished the last dessert, the French strawberry ice cream tower, he patted his stomach and heaved a sigh of relief. The dishes were delicious, but eating was too tiring. It would have been better to serve them all in one go, Ryudo obviously thought. After the meal, Ryudo, Yunyen, and Colored Glaze sat in the living room and played a game of cards. However, as the clock gradually pointed to 8 o'clock, the key person that everyone had been waiting for, Shinchinsuke, finally returned home. When she saw the familiar figure enter the living room from the front door, Yunyen quickly stood up and walked over. At the same time she said, "Mom, why are you?" Yunyen originally wanted to ask, "Mom, why are you back so late?" But she suddenly froze in the middle of the sentence. Because when Yunyen saw her mom coming back, she also brought a very bright, handsome, and tall foreigner with her. This was something that Yunyen never expected. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.